Welcome to Port Elizabeth, South Africa, and our live coverage of the 2015 SAP 5O5 World Championship. Welcome along. It's a beautiful late summer's afternoon here in the Eastern Cape. About 20 degrees. There's a lovely easterly breeze, and it's some wonderful sunshine as well. And enjoying that is Andy Rice. You've been enjoying it for quite a while. More about that in a moment. But it seems like just yesterday that we were celebrating Mike Holt and Rob Woolfall's win in this World Championship.
Yeah, well, it wasn't so long ago, really. When you think about it, it was August last year, so Mike Holt hasn't had anything like a year to be able to enjoy that feeling of being the SAP 505 World Champion. But he did win the pre-Worlds warm-up regatta here. He's looking strong. He's sailing with his regular crew, Carl Smith, who normally he sailed with for a number of years. Rob Woolfall, who he won the Worlds with last year, was actually a temporary stand-in. But Mike is back to see if he can now win a World Championship, this time with Carl Smith, who has yet to win a World Championship.
We've got 4 former World Champions in the fleet. It's a smaller fleet than we had in Kiel at the last Worlds, when I think we had something like over 70 boats anyway. But it's still a competitive fleet and a fairly mixed fleet. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see how it works out.
Yeah, well, we haven't got the same strength in numbers as we had in Kiel, Germany last year, purely because South Africa is a long way from where a lot of the major fleets race. So getting your boat down here is time-consuming and expensive, and flying here is quite expensive. But for those that have made the trip, I think they're in for some fantastic sailing, some fantastic hospitality from the Algoa Bay Yacht Club, who are just so proud to be hosting this event. And I think it's a beautiful country, and the people that come here, I don't think they will ever look back and regret having made the trip here. I think they're going to have a really good week here. And
the Algoa Yacht Club, you can see it just behind us here. It does look very magnificent indeed, with the yellow flags of the SAP World Championship flying behind us. We're very much here in the harbour, and the race course is over out that way. And what sort of sailing can we expect?
Some potentially big rolling waves if it comes in from one direction. Today is going to be an easterly, about 15 knots, so probably a shorter, choppier kind of wave. But in the pre-Worlds warm-up just a couple of days ago, some sensational pictures coming back from Christophe Favreau, the photographer. Big rolling waves. It looks like the Southern Ocean, more like what we see pictures of boats in the Volvo Ocean Race going through. Just waves that if you race in Europe or in most places in the Northern Hemisphere, you're just not going to experience, because really from South Africa going southwards, there's only one bit of land left, and that's Antarctica.
Well, and I was talking to one of the local sailors, very much from Port Elizabeth, and she said, you know, what the visitors here, what the visiting teams are going to have to get used to is being wet the whole time. And obviously they've started to experience that in the pre-Worlds, the sort of the warm-up, let's say, to what is about to get underway today. And we're just a few minutes away from the first race of the day. Let me bring in our stats and analytics expert, Marcus Bauer, who has got, there he is, in all his beauty, and he's got full control of the SAP sailing analytics data as it comes off onto his laptop there, and will be filling us in on all the things that you can't actually see with the naked eye, but is absolutely vital to understanding how the race is unfolding.
Welcome from my side as well, and we can have a look at the venue. Let's have a little fly-in. We see the southern Cape of Africa here, and as we zoom in, we close in onto Port Elizabeth, the Bay of Port Elizabeth, Nelson Mandela Bay here on the right side. And as we close in further, we can see the harbour where we're based, and we go out to the race course and we can see the wind blowing from the southeast at the moment. Let's zoom back out a little bit. That means the wind is washing over that peninsula here. And let me draw on that map. So at the moment, the wind is washing over that peninsula, getting a little bit confused onto our race course down here. And it's supposed to shift over to the left, over to the right, to a more easterly direction over the day. And we'll see how that will influence the racing definitely really nice weather out there. We have data today coming via our SAP Sailing Analytics 3D animations, and in 3 days, or on Wednesday, on the first day of the last final dash towards the title, we're going to have live images of the water, enhancing our 3D images and data.
And the way we get all that data is from trackers that are on the boats, and it's a fairly simple process because you have to keep things simple for sailors. How they get the trackers on the boats?
How do they? Well, they have to sign in and collect them and install them on the boat somewhere where they're not going to fall overboard.
Yep, there's basically a big board in the in the sailors' lounge, and with numbers. Every boat has a number. They go and collect the little waterproof packet off the board and fix it to a designated part of the boat, and that sends back all the information that we'll be bringing you, and Marcus will be analysing over in his corner throughout this week. Some interesting characters as well. That's the beauty of the 505 fleet. It's not just, you know, the top sailors. It's also sailors that do it on a part-time basis. They're pretty damn good, but it's their stories that are interesting. And we've had and a lot of the fleet have had all sorts of issues, even getting their boats here.
Yeah, it's been horrendous for some of the Californians that wanted to come here. Who springs to mind particularly is Mike Martin, who is he has the honour of being the only sailor ever to have won the World Championship in the 505 from both ends of the boat, both as a crew and as a helmsman. And he first won it as a crew for Howie Hamlin back in about, I think it was something like 1999, something like that. He turned up the following year in South Africa in Durban for 2000, and he finished second runner-up in his first World Championships steering the boat. And he's a serious talent that's unfortunately missing from this event because they had container boat troubles. They loaded their 505s on board a standard 40-foot shipping container to be taken down the coast of California through the Panama Canal and down to South Africa, but unfortunately there was a dockers strike in San Francisco. The container and the container ship got held in San Francisco long enough that it meant that their boats haven't arrived on time, which is a terrible shame for them. But fortunately for Mike Holt, the reigning world champion from California, he's originally from Essex in England, and he still keeps his boat, his championship boat, in Essex a lot of the time. So his boat shipped from England for this event, and that's why he's still able to compete at this event and defend his world championship.
And what's remarkable, 20 years in the USA, and he hasn't got the slightest tinge of accent. He still sounds like an Essex boy, doesn't he? We'll hear from him later on the show and later on during the week. We've got a really mixed fleet of nationalities. But going back to what you were saying about the problems with receiving the boats, I think your support with the British flag. I think your support for what the 4 British teams has.
I was going to stay perfectly neutral. I'm not cheering for anyone in particular.
Basically, Marcus, who, as you probably noticed, is German, from his very light accent, was objecting to the fact that Andy had a Union Jack.
I don't know what you're talking about.
So that's gone. But we do have, I was just counting them up, 4 British crews out there taking part. Obviously, the bulk of the fleet are actually from South Africa. And what's interesting is that some of the crews that have turned up, you described the problems with the container strike in the US. They've turned up. They haven't been able to get their boats across the Atlantic. But a lot of the South Africans have provided them with boats. So it just shows what a family the 505 fleet is.
Yes, I've got some interesting news for you guys. They have actually started. There was an information missing, not coming from the race committee, and that's why we don't have the data in the SAP Sailing Analytics yet, but we have a start already.
And the reason that we're looking at Scutcher and Deebich with the under the British flag is that they are the pathfinder for race 1 of the 505 Worlds as we get that underway, and that's because it's such a small fleet that the pathfinder will be determined by whoever's 5th in the previous race. They were 5th overall I believe, in the pre-worlds over the last few days. So they were the pathfinder for the start of this race.
And I spoke to Terry Scutcher earlier, very relaxed character, loves his 505 sailing, and I asked him about the role of the Pathfinder and whether he was looking forward to it or not, and he said, oh, he'll take it whether he gets it or not. He's not bothered. It's unusual that it's 5th place from the previous race that determines the Pathfinder. Normally it's 10th in the previous race puts you as Pathfinder, but because we got quite a small fleet here, they've decided that boat number 5 in the previous race is going to be Pathfinder.
And we'll go into the details of, if you're new to this sort of racing, we'll go into the details and explain exactly how the Pathfinder starts the race and how we get a 505 race underway. We'll go into that in some detail later on, but given we've missed the start, just briefly explain how it works, Andy.
So the Pathfinder boat, in this case Terry Scutcher and Christian Diebich, they start on port tack. Normally port tack has to give way to starboard tack boats. It's the unfavoured tack when two boats are coming together. But when you're the Pathfinder, you have the golden ticket to sail across the whole of the rest of the fleet, and they have to choose when they start behind the Pathfinder. Do they start early on the line, which, looking at this, would be the left-hand lower end of that green line at the bottom of the screen, or do they start later, which is the top end right hand end of that green line at the bottom of the screen? So if you think it's going to favour to go right, you start late. If you think it's going to favour to go left going up the first leg, you start early. So we see there that Jan Saugman, former world champion, he started relatively early. Tina Plattner out on the right hand side, a South African boat starting late and going out to the right hand side.
Let's look a little bit at the top 10 who came out well after the start. We have currently in the lead 3 votes, Tina Plattner with Shelton. So let's look at the top 10 boats who came out well after that start. It's Plattner and Shelton came out well, Stenger and Birkner in 2nd place, Higgins and Johnston, Hamlin and Nelson in 4th place. All had a decent start, and now we see some quite dramatic splits in the fleet. There's not a clear lane so far to make out. Probably 2/3 of the boat heading off to the left side of the course, 1/3 or maybe a quarter of the boats heading out to the right side. Plattner and Shelton betting on the right side. Closer, a little bit closer to the shore. Let me zoom out a little bit. They're heading towards the shore. It's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen there. I can imagine a slight shift to the right, possibly because the wind coming down here is getting shifted a little bit in this area before it swings back. Maybe they're getting some right-handers. That would clearly favor the boats on the right-hand side. Let's see how that pans out. Plattner and Shelton doing really good speed on the right side. We can see the advantage line progressing away from the other boats quite dramatically at the moment. But they're heading out far, far to the right side. And let's have a look at the angles, the differences in angles the boats are sailing. We see Plattner and Shelton heading out this way, whilst the boats here in the middle are heading way higher. So more of a right-hand shift on the right side, which is not exactly favoring the boats on the right side. But the lead is still for Plattner and Shelton on the right-hand side of the course.
Can I just point out that out of the top 4 sailors at the moment, 3 of them are ladies. So it's Tina Plattner and Dave Shelton, followed by Nicola Birkner and Angela Stenger. So the girls making good running early on in this competition. And bearing in mind there aren't actually many girls racing in the competition, I think that's worthy of note.
And it's also interesting because weight has a big importance in sailing the 505, depending on the conditions and depending on the setup. But generally, this is a boat for heavier crews, and therefore you don't often see that many women taking part in the 505.
No, that's right. And especially when you've got waves on the sea, it tends to favour weight. You need the extra power to be able to power the boat through the waves. And so I think that Nicola Birkner and Angela Stenger are going to struggle in this competition if it is going to be a strong wind contest, which is mostly what we're expecting in Port Elizabeth. Tina Plattner, on the other hand, is crewed by Dave Shelton, so she's not suffering for lack of weight on board her boat and still leading out on the right hand side. side. And
actually, the odds are changing a little bit right now. The wind is swinging a little bit to the left, and the left side is looking increasingly good. So we've got some changes in the leaderboard, at least when I look at the SAP analytics. We have Higgins and Marsh on the left-hand side doing really well. Yep. So that was that big swing to the left. And we already saw that a minute ago, the boats on the left-hand side going way higher. I'll look at the wind data in a minute and see how that is reflected in our by our wind devices, if we can actually see that shift there. Yes, and actually in the last minute we've seen a probably 5 to 10 degree shift towards the left that has made some big changes in the leaderboard. Plattner and Shelton on the right hand side, no, not looking that good. Maybe they should be going on to using the shift, tacking and hoping for another shift on the right hand side. But the left hand side is smiling now. All the way to the left it's Higgins and Marsh and Quirk and Roos from Australia. Howard Hamlin up in there. Let's see if the wind swings back.
Do we know if there's a general opinion amongst the local sailors? Because I remember at the last World Championships in Kiel in Germany, there was very much the opinion at the start that the left side of the course was better, and that's the way certainly all the Germans went, and it paid off for a while until conditions changed and the wind shifted. And I'm just wondering if there is a view here that the left or the right is better.
From this angle, my understanding, speaking to one of the local organisers today, is that it doesn't make too much difference which side you go. It's mostly going to be what the breeze is doing. But he did say that early on there would be some relief from some adverse current, and that would favour the Pathfinder and the boats starting late. So maybe that's why early on in this leg we were seeing the right hand also favoured. Maybe that's why Tina Plattner was doing so well out on the right hand side, was partly the relief from some current. But the further up they go on this leg, the less that current has an effect. So it's probably more about what the breeze is doing. And as Marcus just said, the breeze did shift to the left, and it's massively changed the leaderboard. We're not seeing any of the boats in the top 10 now that we were talking about just a few minutes ago.
So we've got a fleet of 36 competitors on this first race of the 505 Worlds for 2015. And they come from 6 different countries. 5 Australians, a Dane, 4 Brits, 4 Germans, 18 South Africans, and 4 from the United States. And I know the South African fleet are really hopeful of getting a good result here and coming and placing a number of boats from the South African fleet in the top 10, and maybe even clinching a world championship with the Funke brothers.
Well, they're not seeing it that way. The Funke brothers, they're just grateful that they've got through the last 3 years of massive organisation building up to this event. And I think it's really easy to underestimate just how much preparation and organisation goes on behind the scenes to make an event like this happen. They say that just to go out sailing and go out racing now is the icing on the cake. But I suspect that you're right, Alec, that once they're out there, they're going to get their competitive bit between the teeth, and they're going to want to get every bit of performance out of themselves this week. I don't see a South African winning a world championship on home waters, unfortunately. They don't have the experience to pass down through the generations in the way that the Germans and the British and the Americans do, and the Australians have been the stronghold of 505 sailing in the last 20 years. So I don't see a South African winning a world championship here, but I do hope that they're successful in their quest to get a few boats into the top 10 here. And Sandy Higgins and Paul Marsh, probably amongst the most accomplished sailors in the 505, not yet to have won a world championship. So here they are leading race 1 of the SAP 505 World Championships. They will be looking over their shoulders at a number of former world champions. Just behind them, fellow Australians Michael Quirk and Luke Payne. Well, Luke Payne
had a tremendous world championship last time round, didn't he?
came second in Kiel last year, crewing for Pete Nicholas, a result that he should never have been able to achieve because they were using a borrowed boat, sailing on limited time in the 505, and yet they managed to come second. So we'll be interested to see how Luke Payne does with a different helmsman this week. But Jan Saugman, he is a double world champion, last won the World Championships in 2012 in La Rochelle. This time sailing with a different crew, Jakob Carbo. They've sailed together for a while, just moving up into second place in this race.
I looked at his data from the pre-worlds, and it was astonishing how high he would sail towards the wind compared to other boats. But that's not what I'm seeing now. He's going decent speed. He's actually one of the fast boats on this first upwind leg now, with 5.72 knots average speed at the moment, and he's not pinching as high. Closing into the windward mark now from the left-hand side. That's him, Saugman and Cabo. We see him there, and he's really close, just 13 meters behind the leader at the moment. That's nothing. And interesting how the boats come from the middle of the course here, closing in onto the windward mark. Not many boats, at least top boats, have overstood. We see coming in. The wind fairly steady, astonishingly steady, I must say. It's just swinging slightly between 70 and 80 degrees.
And our defending champion Mike Holt moving up to fourth place for the moment, but it's early days. The target for this race is about 2 hours for this first race of the day. If we get a second one underway, which we're expecting to, that'll be about an hour and a half in duration. But it's 9 races that make up this World Championship, so there it really is a very long way to go, weather permitting. And as far as the forecast is concerned, I don't think we're expecting to lose any of those 9 races at this point, but you never know. Every result, every race counts, but it is still very much early days. And these crews, these boats, they've been out on the water for a number of days now in the pre-worlds.
And Sandy Higgins and Paul Marsh about to go round the first mark, and so it's an Australian 1-2 going around the top mark. So some Southern Hemisphere sailors making the best of sailing in the Southern Hemisphere, albeit in a few thousand miles away from where they normally race. And we've got Jan Saugman and Jakob Carbo in second or third place. It's hard to say at the moment. But the double world champion from Denmark also doing very well. And the Aussies setting their spinnakers and now planing downwind at high speed down towards the second mark. And if I can just have a bit of a nerd out on some of the technology that Jan Saugman is using on his boat. He's actually using a different type of boat to most of the fleet. It's a prototype from a manufacturer in Poland called Blue. And whereas most 505s attach the front of the jib to a position about 6 inches back from the front of the boat, behind the spinnaker chute, which is where the spinnaker shoots out from when they hoist it. He's decided to hang his jib off the very front of the boat, so he's given himself a longer sail area, and it should have some technical benefits in terms of should make him a little bit faster upwind in certain conditions, and he's convinced that this is the way to go. And he feels that as a lightweight crew in the past he's suffered against the heavier teams in strong winds. He thinks that this configuration may help him in the stronger winds, but also that he still hopes and expects to be fast in the light winds. And we're expecting strong winds, but having spoken to some of the South Africans at this time of year, you can actually get light airs regattas as well, and they say that quite often in PE, Port Elizabeth, PE is what everyone calls it around here, you can find that the light wind specialists end up prevailing in Port Elizabeth, which is sort of against what you would expect, because we tend to think of this as a windy venue. So that's what Jan Saugman, he's putting not all his cards in one corner, but he's always been strong in light winds. He thinks that by moving the position of the jib and extending his sail plan to the full front of the boat as opposed to just back from the boat where most of the rest of the fleet are, that he'll have some technical advantage.
And he's
I've got a
saying that
very
he's-
basic question, guys. We are going for a downwind gate now, aren't we? It's not the reach, because some boats have jibed away, heading towards the downwind gate now, and it makes me wonder what's going on. Can you have a
Well-
peek in the sailing instructions? And
Well, they have a choice of courses, so it could be straight onto a run, which it looks like is what we have here.
or is there potential confusion in the fleet that some boats are heading off for the reaching mark?
Well, it could be, in which case about 5 or 6 boats have made a terrible error by jibing off. So it'd be interesting to know who
Or
those.
the reverse.
Exactly. So yes, it could, just because there are fewer boats doing that doesn't mean that they're wrong. So you would think that Conrads and Haynes, who are the leaders out on the purple line out on the right hand side of our picture, they're very experienced sailors from the USA. You can't imagine that Ted Conrads and Brian Haynes would be making a basic error like that they would have read the sailing instructions. But we will have to see.
and they're being given the lead on the analytics that are coming in on our leaderboard.
And interesting to see that a number of the South Africans have moved up. So suddenly the top 10 leaderboard is looking very strong for the RSA boats, the home boats from South Africa. So a big change. We see more of the leaders on the left-hand side now jibing.
I've seen that before, that boats actually go around the wing mark, despite the fact that they're doing a downwind, because they're sailing such steep angles on the downwind. Seems for 8 to 10 knots, well, maybe it makes sense having these 90-degree downwind angles. And no, everyone has jibed away. I think most of them before they hit that windward, all of them before they hit that windward mark. I wonder if some came to the realization that they're doing a downwind, or if they were actually heading off in that steep angle on purpose.
Well, whatever happened, we've got a 77-year-old, if my maths is correct, in 5th place at the moment. Grant Ballantyne and Evert Grunewald of South Africa, and he's racing in a boat that he first raced, I think, in 1971. So
wow.
And this will be his, or next year will be his 50th year.
I was born that year.
In a 505.
Seems like a long time ago.
Well, he's still going strong, and he's sitting in 5th place at the moment. And the South Africans doing extremely well with 6 boats in the top 10, and that's increasing all the time by the looks of it. Local knowledge seems to be counting at present.
It sure does. It's almost dominated by South African and American teams at the moment. Only just seeing the former leaders, Higgins and Marsh and Quirk and Payne, who are leading around the top mark, back into the top 5. So we're seeing some significant place changes again halfway down the run, and we've seen a massive split side to side. But it does look like Conrads and Haynes' brave move to be the first to jibe off and go in towards the shore side of the course is paying off for them, because they still maintain a 50-metre lead over the second place boat from South Africa, Klaas and von Grunewald. And Holton Smith, Mike Holt, the reigning world champion, only just hanging in there in the top 10, just at the back end of the top 10.
Former champion Ian Pinnell as well.
Sailing this time with Johannes Tellen from Germany, so a rarer alliance there between Britain and Germany, sailing on board the same boat.
A little like this studio.
Yes, yes. So Higgins and Marsh not doing so well at the bottom of the top 10, whilst their compatriots have now moved up into 5th place. But you can see it's jumping around all over the place. Will Conrads and Haynes, amongst all this chaos down the first run of this first race in the World Championships, will the Americans be able to hold on to their lead? Well, at the moment it looks like they might be being threatened by local team Klaas and von Grunewald, who are now nominally moving up into first overall. More than halfway down the first run now. but I think it looks like things are coming back okay for the early leaders, and that the boats that went out to sea, that carried on out to sea before jibing, are actually doing okay.
Yeah, we've got slight issues at the moment with our leaderboard because of a wrong course allocation, but we're fixing that at the moment. But we can still see from the top view that Higgins and Marsh are doing well. They're headed out far to the left-hand side of the course and are now closing in towards the leeward gate.
I was speaking to Warwick Ham, one of the local South African sailors, and he says that for this time of year you can expect a good wind of about 14 knots, some wave action plus a little bit of current, and he points out the water is not that cold. So he most of the time sails in a shorty wetsuit in PE, which is a nice change. In fact, Mike Holt won his World Championship in a very cold and wet Kiel week last year. He wants to wear a shorty wherever he can, just to save weight in the boat. He's that obsessed with taking weight out of the boat that he'll wear a short wetsuit. But here he's actually justified in wearing his short wetsuit because he's got the climate for it.
And he's used to better weather as well on the west coast of the States.
Well, that's true too. Although cold water in the Pacific and probably not that different here. Cold water, but lovely warm air temperature and strong winds, and probably more than Kiel Week last year. This is a venue that should actually, sorry, not Kiel Week, the World Championships in Kiel.
Yeah. This should suit Holt.
Yes,
better in a
down
way.
to the ground, really. Yeah, because we are expecting strong winds with that proviso that you never quite get what you want in sailing.
We had flatter waters in Kiel than we'd expect here, and less of a breeze. But as you've said, this venue over the years has hosted many championships, many big sailing events, and hasn't really proved itself as being a big sea, big breeze venue.
Well, Mike Holt said that after racing in Durban, I think it was 2000, the last time it was in South Africa, that he would never come back. Actually, he was so disenamoured with Durban, and also he felt that apartheid hadn't really moved aside and that there was still segregation between blacks and whites. He says it feels a lot more relaxed, a lot friendlier this time that the country has really moved on, but also that the sailing is too good to resist. Durban has caused problems in the past in that you need to listen to the locals. Some of the visiting sailors to Durban didn't listen. They were told not to go out sailing because a buster was going to come through. They did, and 2 boats sank. And for 505s to sink, that takes some doing. These are amongst the most seaworthy boats that you could ever hope to go afloat on. So,
but that was 15 years ago, and things have changed dramatically in South Africa. And have things changed, though, on a sporting front? Have things changed on the boats? Because there are guys out there who are sailing boats that are 30, 40 years old, and I have to say they're beautiful looking boats, but they look 40 years old as well. They're patched up, and they've got real history to them. But as far as let's say we compare, Hamlin's brand new boat to a boat that was built in 1970. How different is that technology?
It's definitely an evolution. There's been no revolutions in the 505 because it's a one design. There have been a few upgrades along the way. They've now got a bigger spinnaker than they used to, which enables them to do these big angles downwind as opposed to just sailing dead downwind like they used to. They used to sort of float down towards the bottom mark, whereas now they really power their way down there with the crew on the trapeze in anything more than about 7 or 8 knots of wind speed. So the way they sail them has changed because the technology has changed to some extent, but I would think that those upgrades have been applied to the old boats as well. Otherwise, there would more or less be no point in going out. You'd be so outclassed that you wouldn't bother going out. So the hull shape hasn't really changed that much. The masts haven't really changed that much, but there's still going to be significant boat speed differences. If you want to win a world championship, you have to have a boat that's probably 10 years old or less. I mean, even 10 years old seems pretty old to me, but because they're made of carbon fibre, they don't really wear out. They're quite expensive boats to buy, but they last forever, the boats that are made of carbon fibre now. The older boats that are made of wood or glass fibre, they get soft over time, and you want a stiff boat that doesn't yield as it jumps over the waves. That's a loss of power every time the boat wobbles.
Well, we were talking about Grant Ballantyne as you know, the 77-year-old in the fleet. His boat is actually got wooden decks and a fiberglass hull, so it's a real mishmash of materials and so on. And it's interesting how when you look at the front of the fleet and you look at some of the top 505 world sailors, you know, they have got their rigging and its setting all marked out on the side of the boat, on the deck. They've written it in, etched it in pen, and you know, scratched it into the side, so they know exactly how they want things tied up or not. So bring us an update, Marcus, from the analytics.
We don't have the full course sorted out yet, but what we do know is that Higgins and Marsh are looking really well, going upwind, probably in the lead. On the right-hand side of the course. We're still sorting out the course, and we'll bring updates from the leaderboard as soon as we have the course allocation laid out properly again. Please excuse us for that little delay. It's the first day. The mark layers need to sort out their trackers on the buyers, so it was a little mix-up there, and we're working on fixing it.
So there we go. I was jesting earlier that you got to keep things simple for the sailors, especially with getting the trackers on board and making sure they're all on board. Well, they've got it right. It sounds like you've got to keep things simple for the officials as well.
and for us, it has to be said.
Well, we just sit and it all comes together on a computer screen, and we react to that. So that's the easy part of things.
Also up on top of the fleet is Saukman Cabo. Still seems like they probably went out on purpose on that downwind onto the right-hand side. They definitely didn't lose by making that move. And another boat doing well up there. Let me zoom in a little bit into my analytics. Higgins Marsh, they're in a close battle with Saukman. And there's a third boat right in there. Let's check. Holt and Smith are battling with them.
And there they are. We can see them on the screen now.
Nice little match there between those three boats in the pretty much in the middle of the course. Yep, they're right smack in the middle of the course, tacking their way upwind.
Sandy Higgins and Paul Marsh of
Here we have
Australia.
Them bunched up.
And they finished third a couple of times in previous World Championships. Adelaide 2007 on home waters, and again on home waters, Hamilton Island up in Queensland in Australia. So they've sailed well when the World Championships have been hosted in Australia. Now it's the opportunity for the Aussies to see how they can do when they're sailing overseas.
Saukman breaking away a little bit from those two boats onto the left-hand side. Let's follow that battle a little bit and see how it will pan out. At the moment, Saukman looks quite good. A little bit hard to judge from those angles. Maybe we want to look on top onto them. Still don't have the advantage line in here. So he broke away a little bit onto the left. Higgins and Marsh doing good speed onto the right side. Little luff there on Holt and Smith, going back down now. Nice battle between these three boats. Will Holt and Smith pass Saukman and Cabo? Looks like it. They're going a really steep angle.
They're making very fast progress, Holt and Smith. They're obviously got the right angle here, and they're going to cross in front of the former world champion Saugman.
Yeah, looking at the angle compared to Higgins and Marsh and Saugman and Cow, it looks like they're going dramatically high. Slight bear away there now. Was all good enough to pass them. And they continue.
You've got the strong wind specialist, Mike Holt and Carl Smith, just ahead of the light wind specialists, Saugman and Carbo from Denmark, but at the moment, not much to choose between them. And having said they're specialists, they're not silly in the other breezes either. It's just give them their favourite breeze. Mike Holt would ask for a storm, and Jan Saugman would ask for a light wind drifter. But you have to take what you're given in sailing, and at the moment they're both making a very good fist of the conditions out there today on Algoa Bay.
So looking at the speed of those top three boats, average speed so far are very close. 6.74 knots on Higgins and Marsh. Holt and Smith have done 6.84 knots, not much in it, and 6.77 knots on Saugman and Cabo. So equal speed. It's going to be up to smarts there, I guess. Holt and Smith maybe with a very, very slight speed edge. And we've got our leaderboard back. Course is sorted out. Iron out our little problems we had with the trackers. I hope that's going to work until the end of the race. Looking good now. And beautiful battle between these top three boats, which probably are World Championship title contenders. Definitely those three, we expected them up there.
Well, certainly they're amongst the most experienced crews in the fleet.
A nice battle they have here. Saugman and Cabo, he was on the left-hand side of those two. Now he's moved to the right-hand side. "25 meters between them. Will Holt pass Saugman? Nice test. That first race for that new boat Saugman is using. And I'd say it's doing well for a prototype.
Yeah, it's a risky move going to a different type of boat to the rest of the fleet. Polish boat from the manufacturer's Blue. Most of the front of the fleet these days, I think, are using Rondar boats or Ovington boats, both made in the UK. I think Howie Hamlin uses Water Rat boats built in the USA, but I think actually he may be using a UK boat as well here, the one that he's just recently fitted out.
That fourth boat in the background, that was Quirk and Roos from Australia, and we can see how far those boats have broken away from the rest of the fleet. In fifth position we have the Funke brothers. Also, they actually headed out to the left-hand side.
So a good showing for the Australian fleet at the moment. 2 of their 5 boats in the top 5 right now. Quirk and Payne in 4th, and of course the current leaders, Funke brothers, who have been instrumental in bringing this World Championship to Port Elizabeth, currently leading the South African fleet in 5th place.
First German boat in 6th place, Böhm and Roos. So the Roos, they're brothers. The 2 crews on the Australian boat and the German boat.
On Michael Quirk's boat is Luke Payne.
It's Luke Payne.
Luke Payne sailing with Michael Quirk.
Okay, so that's a mistake in the leaderboard there.
We've got
we're
got Quirk and Payne on our leaderboard.
Yeah.
Okay, then that's interesting.
For the viewers, it's
For the
correct.
viewers, it's correct what you're looking at. It's correct what you're seeing. So Higgins and Marsh in the lead, with Denmark's Saugman and Jakob Carbo in 2nd place, and the Australians now moving up from 4th to 3rd with Michael Quirk and Luke Payne. And it's changing all the time, and it's making for a very interesting race at the front of the fleet.
Higgins and Marsh closing into the ley line. Not much more in it for them. Great upwind for them though. No loss really.
It's interesting to see Michael Quirk and Luke Payne make that move up into the top three, because they were about 50 metres back from the lead, and now they're really beginning to threaten as a top three contender in this race. And you have to wonder if Luke Payne and his tactical genius that we saw last year in Kiel is coming into effect again. He's a good guy to have in the front of the boat, clearly capable of winning a world championship. I don't know much about Michael Quirk. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to him later on in the boat park and find out a little bit more about his helmsman. But we know what Luke Payne is capable of from his second place at the World Championships last year.
We know pretty much what all these guys are capable of. They're extremely experienced and decorated sailors. And as it comes to the mark, we're really looking at a battle amongst 4 boats as they begin the 4th leg of 8, and really they'll be looking out across the water at each other, and they'll be taking decisions. Do they try and take a decision on? Do they make a move? Do they build their tactics up according to what they think the others are going to be doing and how close they are and what direction they're going in, or do you just sail your course?
No, you're forced to think tactically when you're this close together. The ideal is to be where Higgins and Marsh are, way out in the lead at the moment, with a nice gap on the next 3 boats, and then you can start to sail purely in terms of best speed and sail the straightest course to the next mark. In this case, for example, whereas Mike Holt and Carl Smith, they've got 2 other boats breathing down their necks. They may want to protect their position a little bit more, which could mean that they sail a little bit higher than they would normally want to. At the moment, they're not being suckered into that game, and Holt and Smith are sailing a very straight line towards the next mark. But you could see the Aussies in 4th place trying to attack the Danes, trying to roll over the top of them, and they could get caught up in their own personal battle, which will only hand more distance to the current leaders, Higgins and Marsh. And you can see a small gain. The meter line is going up meter by meter, almost towards 100 meters advantage for Higgins and Marsh, and that could be part of the fact that they are well out in front of the rest of the pack, able to sail the waves and sail the wind exactly how they want to, not having to sail defensively.
The South African Funke brothers are just going round now, and Ricky and Brennan Robinson will follow as well, with Bowman Roos separating the 2 South African boats. But really it is a battle of the first 4, the 2 Australians, the Americans and the Danes. And at the moment the Australians are increasing that lead. They've increased it by about 20 metres in the last minute or so.
And they seem to have just an edge more speed. If you look at the readout at the top of the screen, they're sometimes hitting 12 knots. It seems like they just have a little bit more top end speed than the other boats.
Quirk and Payne, though, were going a lot faster than the Danes, but the Danes seem to have brought that back, so they've changed things slightly on the Danish boat and are regaining distance between 3rd and 4th.
And that's a good leap that Higgins and Marsh have made there, because they were very much in a 3 or 4 way battle going up that previous leg, but just towards the top end of that leg they got out onto the starboard ley line, and they just seemed to make a small gain that they've translated up into a pretty significant advantage now as they come down towards the jibe mark for the first time on this race.
It's actually almost 150 meter lead they have now in the straight direction. Here we have 146 meters, and we can see this is the downwind lead, which is not that interesting at the moment. They're heading off to the wing mark now, and really good job on them. I would almost put early bets on them for the world title, very early bets, but just because I saw how they sailed in Kiel a few months ago, they were close to, they had a good chance to win that world championship as well. And now we already have a battle between the reigning world champion and Higgins and Marsh, and that's going to be maybe the interesting battle of this week.
Well, that's a very early call there, Marcus.
Well, he's looking good, you got to admit that.
Yeah, I'm just not quite so sure it's going to be a 2 way battle for the World Championship.
No. I agree, but it's probably the ones we would have put our money on before the regatta, and they're already up there in the first race. But a lot can happen in this week. Wins on this bay can be very difficult and confusing, and looks like we've got a very straight breeze today with more of a speed-oriented first race, but that could change, and that's the interesting thing about sailing. It's never that simple.
And also impressing right now, Ricky and Brennan Robinson in 7th place at the moment for South Africa. They've kept up a pretty good average speed throughout this first race, and they're new to the 505, which makes it even more impressive. In fact, they've just bought the boat that they're racing in. They have more experience in the 407 and even offshore sailing, which of course is completely different experience.
In the 470.
Sorry?
I assume
470.
In the 470.
Yeah.
So have they done an Olympic campaign? Do you guys have any information about that?
I'm not sure that they have, but
we can find out more on that one.
We'll get to know them better throughout the week.
Yeah. Yeah, well, if they've only just bought the boat, to be lying in 7th in your first World Championship race in the 505 class, that's really impressive. Sitting just one place in front of former world champion Ian Purnell, who in the UK is a dinghy legend. He's won numerous national, European and world titles. But he at this time is sailing with the German Johannes Tellen. Marcus, what do you know about Johannes?
Well, he's been in the class for a long time, and I don't know if he's been top 3 at the Worlds before, I must admit, but he's surely a very experienced sailor, and he's been in the class for a long time, and I think he's quite tall, which always helps with a 505 crew. So good crew right there.
Well, yes, Johannes Tellen, he did finish in 3rd place in the World Championships in 2006 in Hayling Island in Great Britain. That on that occasion it was won by Mark Upton Brown and Ian Mitchell, who aren't here this time. But in 2nd place that year, just ahead of Jens Fendel and Johannes Tellen, was Howie Hamlin and Jeff Nelson. And Howie Hamlin sailed with a number of different crews over the years, and Jeff Nelson has sailed with a number of different helmsmen. But here they are back together again for the first time since those Worlds in 2006. And so they're both former world champions, Howie Hamlin having won crewed by Mike Martin, and Jeff Nelson having won the World Championships crewing for Mike Martin. So Mike Martin is the common factor there. Mike Martin, unfortunately, one of the sailors that didn't make it here because of the container problems, the dockers strike in San Francisco, meaning that the container with the 505s from California didn't make it here on time, paid for their plane tickets, paid for all the accommodation, put all the money in to come here, put in the practice time, but not able to compete, which is a terrible shame for them. Howie Hamlin, he had a spare boat that was sitting in the UK. He was having it shipped here to be taken on a sort of a triangular route back to California, where he was going to fit that boat out in his garage at his leisure, because it's a hugely time-consuming process to fit one of these 505s out. They have so many bits of rope and string and pulleys and blocks and screws and all kinds of things that you've got to put on. Well, he's had to do that here in the boat park, and also at the garage of one of the local yacht club members, Jim Foote, who kindly lent his garage and his time. Marcus, I think you want to cut in and...
Yeah, just some looking at the data, something quite interesting happened. I mean, it's a bit of a speed race at the moment, and Higgins and Marsh, they managed to pull out by 160 or 170 meters. They must have put in a clean jibe, but now their lead is shriveling up again. Actually, it's going down by the second, and Holt Smith, they have amazing speed right now. It looks like they've totally geared up, and they're going a lot faster now, and they're really closing in on Higgins and Marsh. Not sure what they've done there. Surely something that we should talk to them about tonight. That will be an interesting conversation, whether he will let some secrets out, but he's definitely faster now. Looking at the average speeds, he's the fastest boat on the course, and a lot of that good speed he must have put in the last minute or so.
Because at one point he was actually passed by Jan Saugman and Jakob Carbo, so I was wondering if something had gone wrong for Holton Smith, who's normally very fast downwind, and suddenly he's found the turbo boost again.
Well, leg 3 seemed to separate the fleet with the top 4 moving away, and it seems that leg 5 is now beginning to see a separation amongst the top 4. We saw Quirk and Payne drop down significantly there with their speed, although that's now picked up again. So we feel it's gusty out there at the moment.
It's really hard to say. We'll know a lot more towards the back end of the championship when we have live footage out on the race course. It's hard to draw those kind of conclusions without being able to see more.
I would expect a steady wind though, because it's blowing fairly freely over the water, and I don't think it's very confused winds today. That's why I'm calling it a bit of a speed race. But let's see how this last upwind will pan out. Definitely an interesting battle going on. Holt and Smith have geared up. Let's see how they're doing on the upwind. I'll go into my data and try to find out what the initial speeds are going into this first leg.
So the top 4 are all cleanly round that mark as they head off onto the 6th leg of 8. And this isn't going to take 2 hours, is it?
No, we found this last year at the Worlds in Kiel as well. We had a target time of 120 minutes, but rarely did the races go for more than an hour and a half. So it looks like
we've been racing for about 50 minutes or so.
Yeah, we have. So they're gonna. There's probably another maybe half hour of this race left.
So first information from that leg is that Higgins and Marsh are heading out with good speed. They've got 6.2 knots average speed so far since they rounded that leeward mark. And Holt and Smith a little bit slower. Maybe they're going slightly higher. They're behind them, so they might lose a little bit speed but cover less distance. Hard to say, but they definitely don't have an speed advantage right now over the leaders.
Surprising to see that Holt and Smith are still going out to the right. You'd have thought they'd attacked earlier to cover the 2 boats in 3rd and 4th. And even now with the leaders, Higgins and Marsh, having tacked, Holt and Smith carrying on. So there's something about the right-hand side that Holt really likes. And at the moment that's nominally put him down into 3rd place, with Quirk and Payne finding something good on the left-hand side. So what is Mike Holt doing? Because he's separating from the rest of the fleet. Normally that's by a boat that is maybe concerned by a lack of boat speed and is trying to do something else, wants to sail away from the fleet and gamble a little bit higher. But for a world champion to do that, I'm a little bit confused by that.
No, and he's tacking now. He's not breaking away too far. He's still staying in contact with the fleet. Well, the fleet's only composed out of 3 boats at the moment. From his perspective, that's the boats he needs to cover, and he looks quite good. He tacked and he's going high. Slight bearway now. We can see that if we close in a little bit.
But just remember, Quirk and Payne were lying in a clear 4th place going down that previous leg, and now we find that they're back up in a fight with Jan Saugman and Jakob Carbo. They've just had
a pretty close fight as well.
Yeah, so I think so far the left has worked pretty well.
But I think Holt and Smith, they're not even looking that much onto the left side. They probably want to go for the win and try to find a way past Higgins and Marsh. And maybe they've let go a little bit too much of the boats on the left-hand side.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to ask Mike Holt when he gets ashore what he was thinking was. Is he thinking purely in terms of speed, sailing his own race, or was he sailing tactically as well? Because tactically, I would say he's quite exposed at the moment, but it seems like it's coming good for him. It looks like the right-hand side is beginning to do a little bit better again.
But there's an increasing separation now between the top 4 and the rest of the fleet. It'd be interesting to see what the distance is now between 4th place and the Funke brothers in 5th. Bowman Roos of Germany, one of 4 German crews in this race, in 6th place. And then our Pathfinder at the start of race 1 move up to 5th place, Scotcher and Diebich on 6, round about 7 knots, but seem to have increased dramatically there, and that's what's pulled them a couple of places up the fleet. But definitely a large separation now between the top 4 and the rest of the fleet.
So Jan Saugman moving up into the lead. So maybe the left is beginning to come good. And that will be concerning for Mike Holt on the far side. So very little to choose right now between the Danes and the leading Australians, Sandy Higgins and Paul Marsh, who have been leading this race for quite some time. But at the moment it's the double world champion Saugman on the left hand side at the bottom of your screen, who is the new race leader.
Or is he?
Or is he? There was a gap in the space-time continuum there.
Again. Here we go again.
Yeah, some quirks in the leader line right here. I think
We'll wait for this to sort itself out, because
Holt and Smith are still looking good. We can see that that leader line is not quite correct at the moment.
data coming off the boats the whole time, and massive data that is being constantly processed and turned into the pictures that we're enjoying here. And a cross between Saugman and Quirk, with the Australians crossing ahead, but their fellow Australians Higgins and Marsh still out in the lead. And it looks from that as if Holt and Smith have moved up into second place, so that that sort of gamble out to the right has worked.
Well,
Yeah.
they were in second place. They haven't lost anything. I think we had some mix-ups in the leader line all along the way. I didn't think he pulled a huge risk heading out to the right-hand side there. He's trying to make a gain over Higgins and Marsh, but he's not really gaining because I think his average, his speed in this leg, let me look at the data, he is doing roughly 6 knots, and Higgins and Marsh are actually a little bit faster on the upwind at the moment.
So are those average VMG speeds?
This is actually speed over ground, so we need to look at the angles they're doing at the same time. And my feeling was that Holt was sailing a little bit higher. He was definitely out of the leeward mark, but that's because he had Higgins and Marsh in front of him, probably. And now here it looks like they're doing a little bit more height towards the wind. VMG calculations only work with very accurate wind devices. We've got 3 very nice wind devices out there on the water, but it's not enough to calculate the accurate VMG for every boat. So now it looks, though, as if the gap is narrowing. 15 meters. Could be a wind shift. I'll look at my data if I can see a wind shift at the moment. Has gone a little bit to the right. It's more towards the right than it was before. But Holt and Smith are not closing in, and it looks like Higgins and March on the left-hand side have gotten lifted again. There must have been a left-hand shift, and Holt and Smith are taking that as well. That's why they've tacked underneath.
Former world champion Ian Pennell of Britain with Johannes Tellen in 7th place, and there are 2 Tellens in the fleet, because Aaron Tellen, also from Germany, is sailing under the South African flag. He's crewing for Bronwyn Class, one of the women competing in this fleet, and she was it was an interesting story, because again it shows how the 505 sailing family works. She was short of a crew member for this. She had I think her crew dropped out, and just asked around, and they said, look, Aaron's not bad, give him a call in Germany. And she called him a few days ago, and here he is sailing off the coast of Port Elizabeth.
Fantastic. Well, that's throwing yourself in at the deep end. A new pairing racing in a world championship.
Not quite sure where they are. We can't tell from that top 10 leaderboard, but it'd be interesting.
Who are you looking for? I can tell you.
Bronwyn Class, sail number 7822.
They're currently lying in 23rd position.
Okay, So not doing too badly for a new partnership.
Yeah. No, it's a tough ask to get together for a World Championship and just start sailing together like that. Which
And
I think is pretty much what Ian Pennell and Johannes Tellen are doing as well. So both Tellens sailing with new partners, as far as I know.
My speed over ground comparison between Holt and Smith and Higgins and Marsh, and maybe we can look at that right now, bring that on screen. Maybe it's quite interesting. We've got a little red line for Higgins and Marsh, and he's been on par with Holt and Smith for the whole race. But just in the last minute or so, he's pulled out and he's doing more speed now. Almost looks like he caught a gust there, or he's gearing up in some way. But that's going to help him pull away a little bit again from his opponent, Holt and Smith. At the moment, there is not much in it between them. I'd guess just 20 meters. But I'll check on that figure in a second. So now they've closed in onto the ley line on the right-hand side. Holt and Smith had to do another tack. No, he just luffed up a little bit, and they hit that ley line very early. So at least tactically, bit of a game over situation for that upwind between the first two. So we could close in a little bit and look at them doing a speed race there. It's going to be a speed battle. Maybe we can highlight the speeds on those two boats. I can look at them in the sailing analytics as well. Need to dig that out.
So whilst Marcus presses his buttons and brings us more analytics off the water, we should say that on these first 3 days, so today, Sunday and Monday, I've lost track of time. That's what intercontinental air flight, air travel does for you. What day is it today?
Well, you can tell us about why you're struggling with that in a moment, because you've had a bit of an ordeal getting here, Alec.
Yeah,
It's Saturday.
It's Saturday,
right?
Yeah.
So
first day of the week.
Saturday, Sunday. That's it. Saturday, Sunday, Monday. We'll be bringing you this live tracker picture off the water, and commentating to that, and then on Thursday and Friday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, we'll be bringing you live pictures from our camera boats off the water as well, which will really bring the climax to these 2015 505 World Championships alive.
I just want to give a shout out to Pete Nicholas, because he's watching online. Well, it was Pete who was second in the World Championships last year, and he's not able to be here this time, but he's still watching online and cheering on, no doubt, his mate Luke Payne, who is having a great race. He's currently in third in this race, crewing for Michael Quirk. So hi to Pete and everybody else.
Someone else who
I've looked at the data a bit more, and it's amazing how Higgins and Marsh could just speed up in the last 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and really get an edge on the rest of the fleet. It's almost like they're doing half a knot more. Also an interesting point to talk to them about tonight. Maybe we should take note of that. They were really speeding up, similar to Holt and Smith on the last reach towards the leeward gate.
somebody else who's missing, you mentioned Peter Nicholas, but Rob Woolfall, who crewed with Mike Holt and therefore is also defending champion from the finals in Kiel last year. He's missing officially because his boat got stuck in the container dispute in America, but actually he's about to become a father as well, isn't he?
Yes, so
So politically, that's why he's not here.
It could well be. I think a part of him was breathing a sigh of relief that he wasn't going to have that conversation. That when the boat got stuck in the container, he was really left with no choice. And so Rob Wolfel, he's going to have his hands full changing nappies fairly soon anyway. So maybe it was a blessing that his boat got stuck in the container.
Although interesting that it even got into the container and that he was considering coming in the first place.
Yeah, that was a brave move. A brave move that maybe he paid the dockers to go on strike in San Francisco. Maybe
his wife did.
Yes, good point.
But on the race course, leg 7, the penultimate leg of this race, Higgins and Marsh still out in front. Holt and Smith in second. And we've got 2 times world champion Sagman and Carbo back in 4th place at the moment.
So they're on the free running leg again. They've got choices down this leg. They can jibe off if they want to. But at the moment, Holt and Smith making life fairly easy for Sandy Higgins and Paul Marsh, following them down the run, down the left-hand side of the run, or the right-hand side of your picture as you're looking at it.
And you can see in the background the fleet really spreading out now.
For anyone who wants all the information about this race, go to sapsailing.com, check out the sailing analytics, and you can find all the boats we've been talking about, the leaders mostly now, but all the information is there online for anyone to look at sapsailing.com.
Yes, and I was sitting in Johannesburg Airport yesterday, looking at that website, watching all the details and the analytics and the playbacks from the pre-worlds, and there is literally so much information there. It is fascinating stuff. It's just a shame I had 14 hours to look through it.
Yes, there's many interesting things to do in South Africa, and yet you chose to spend a day in an airport lounge. So just tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it wasn't. It clearly was. It clearly wasn't my choice, but there we are. Seemingly there was a problem between South Africa Airways and British Airways, and their computer systems didn't talk. So I arrived on a BA flight, but they wouldn't let me on the South African
Whilst
flight.
your guys are chatting away, we've almost
there a
got
race
to
going
overtake
on?
it. There is a race going on. We always have almost have an overtaking maneuver now. We have a situation similar to the last race, and we can see the speed of Holt and Smith, and we can see how close they are now. To Higgins and Marsh, they're about to pass, and they've got that good speed again that they had on the last reach. There's definitely something going on there, and they're taking the lead now. Sorry to interrupt you, Alec, but I thought that was
there's nothing
important.
more boring than someone else's travel woes, so that's fine. This is far more interesting as the defending champion takes the lead in the first race of the World Championships. Higgins and Marsh, who have been so fast, are now dropping back very, very quickly.
It almost looks like they've got a bag on their centerboard.
Yeah.
They got that bag off by the look of it. Bit of a comeback there for the Australians. And let's hope we see a great battle between these two for the rest of this race, because we're nearing the business end of this race. And what we thought was a 4-horse race now looks like a 2-horse race.
But the speed difference on that downwind is amazing. I mean, it's almost half a knot that Holt and Smith are going fast. I can't judge on the angles right now, but they don't look too bad either. Actually, yeah, they've covered less distance with more speed. So good work on them. I see a rank gain of 3 places, which is kind of odd for this leg, because they've come from 2nd place, I believe. But
what wind data do we have?
You mean the wind strength?
Yeah.
Let me check. We currently have around, just a second.
I'm just speculating. I just wonder if the wind has increased and maybe Holt and
10
Smith.
knots.
Oh, 10 knots, not much breeze.
Yeah, 10 to 11 knots.
So significant gain. I thought it just suggested to me that maybe the wind was a little bit stronger than that. The way they made that leap.
But one more leg of this race to go, so Higgins and Marsh will want to stay in touch with Holt and Smith, and it doesn't look like they are doing if that data there is spot on.
That's quite a statement right here. Sailing on top, sailing over the other guys like this. On the upwinds, they were on par, I'd say. Similar speeds. Maybe Higgins and Marsh had a slight edge on them, but on the downwind, Holt and Smith are definitely a force to reckon with.
The Funke brothers managing to be the best of the rest still. They haven't had it all their own way in the next pack. But
we were wondering what the separation was. We now know that it's almost 700 metres between fourth. Well, no, that's the leader and fifth place. But so we're looking at, 400 odd metres between fourth and fifth. Bowman Roos down there in sixth. And they've remained, that second half of the top 10 have remained fairly steady over the last few legs.
Yes, they have. You're right. One that's missing from there, however, is Howie Hamlin and Jeff Nelson, who were briefly inside the top 10. They seem to have slipped just outside. But early race leaders, Conrads and Haynes, also from USA, in ninth place, so still hanging on to a fairly good score at the moment.
And what do you think is the reason for that separation between the top four and the rest? What's made the difference?
I'll dig in the data to find out whilst you have a chat about it.
Well, they're coming up to the final turn of the race. Holt and Smith through first. And they begin their final leg to the finish line with Higgins and Marsh trying to stay in touch with the defending champions. And certainly it looks like the other two, Quirk and Payne, with Saugman and Carbo, are out of it. But there's still a podium place, of course, for race one.
Well, I would love to know what Marcus's data reveals about the reasons for that separation, because I think that's one of the mysteries of sailing. Sometimes when you're competing in the thick of battle, sometimes you don't even know why these things...
We'll look into that as Holt and Smith notch up the first win of the first race of the 2015 SAP 5O5 World Championships. So the defending champion has definitely marked out what his intentions are. He wants to defend it. He's confident. He did well in the pre-worlds, in the warm-ups, and he's doing well now. So Holt and Smith, the winning crew in the first race, with Higgins and Marsh of Australia coming in second, and a good day really for Australia. Just 5 crews in the fleet, and 2 of their boats get podium places. Higgins and Marsh in second, with Michael Quirk and Luke Payne using all that experience to bring them in third place. Former world champion from Denmark, Jan Saugman and Jakob Carbo bringing in fourth place. So the top 4 pretty much as they separated 2 or 3 legs ago, but it was just the lead that swapped, and it swapped and changed several times, but in the end it was the defending champion that came out on top.
Good start for the Aussies. Not many of them here, but 2 of them in the top 3.
One thing that I can already say that stands out with the top of the fleet is they all started early. I'll double check the data, but that's what it looks like. They were all starting early and heading out to the left-hand side. Speed-wise, they stick out somewhat. The top 10 boats all above 7 knots average speed, and then it drops off a little bit. This data is still adjusting as the boats are finishing.
Now either the Funke brothers have capsized or have a problem, or I think the data's sorting itself out.
That is a GPS hiccup.
Yeah, they're leading the rest of the fleet. So the top 4 have finished a minute or so ago. and the rest of the fleet now coming into that final turn for the final leg across the finish line.
And
with Scutcher and Debish and Pennell and Tellin of Britain definitely challenging the South Africans, coming in to 5th.
And whoever wins that battle would be Pathfinder for the next race. So is Terry Scutcher going for Pathfinder for second time running in a day?
And the question is, would you want to be?
Well, I think he did all right that way, but I'm also asking a question that I'm not sure if any of us will know. It sort of dig into how the 505 class works. I think if you have already been Pathfinder, I'm wondering if it gets passed down to the next boat. So anyway, as it stands, it looks like the Funke brothers are going to finish 5th, and if they do, they will become Pathfinders in the next race, which will mean they will have to go right in the next race coming up.
So Thomas and Peter, who... well, certainly the rest of the sailors out there from South Africa see them as being the leaders of the South African pack of boats out on the water, and they lead the South African fleet across in first place. So they finish 5th, Scutcher and Debish in 6th, Ian Pennell and Tellin cross the line in 7th place. But what a result for the next South Africans, Robinson, Ricky and Brennan Robinson, who we were talking about earlier. New boat for them, new experiences in the 505, and they've done extremely well as they complete the final leg. Howie Hamlin coming in now in 10th place. So I think I'm just trying to work out what was the best position Hamlin had. Was it 10th throughout the race? Well,
it didn't get much higher than that, I don't think.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was in the top 5 early on, but
will he be happy, a man of his experience, but in a new boat with new settings? Will he be pleased with that result?
It's hard to know. I mean, interviewing him this morning, when you asked him what his hopes are, you still get the sense that this is a world championship he wants to win. So even through all the troubles that he's had, just getting his boat on the start line and actually being in a position to race, I still sense that he and Jeff Nelson, both former world champions, feel they have it in them to win another world title. So I would think maybe 10th is a little bit disappointing, because 10th is not going to be good enough in a 33 boat fleet to win this world championships. You're going to need to get your scores in the top 5.
But all the talk after race 1 is about the defending champion, Mike Holt, and his crew, Carl Smith, flying the American flag, and Carl is American, an ex-Navy SEAL, in fact. Mike, a Briton who's lived in America for many, many years, and therefore sails under the USA flag and sail number 9072. They bring in race 1 in first place, and really now look like they're going to be increasingly difficult to topple from the title of world champions.
Well, again, I think it's very early days to say that.
8 races still to go, still plenty to race for. Marcus?
Well, what I can see from the data is there's a clear correlation between race success and speed. Surprise, surprise, that's what we find often. But there's no real correlation between the distance traveled. And we'll look at that data in some more detail later on. It was a bit of a speed race that sort of matches the conditions that I suspect we have out there, where it's all about going fast, very steady winds, not that many shifts. So the second race is going to be similar, I assume. Maybe the wind is going to swing a little bit more towards the east. What was predicted, but that's only going to make the winds even more steady.
Any surprises in that race for you, Andy?
Let's see. In terms of, I'm just trying to think I think most of the front runners were there or thereabouts. So I think our expected pecking order is more or less working out. I don't know enough about Michael Quirk to know if that would be expected, but I'm sure Luke Payne, runner-up last year, wouldn't be sailing with a dummy. So we'll find out more about Michael in the course of the next few days. I didn't know so much about him. All the other guys at the front of that race just then I would have expected to see there. So no particular surprises at the moment. But I think...
We can look at the results once more. Let's look at the results. So let's get them on from that race. That's the top 10. Maybe you can read through them. Are they coming up, the results? In a second. Boats are waiting out on the water for the next race. Beautiful conditions, around 10 knots. Wind picking up slightly, I'd say.
Yeah, the wind traditionally here off in the bay off Port Elizabeth does pick up considerably, in fact, during the afternoon, and will be and is doing again here. In fact, we're looking we're situated inside the harbour itself, and you can see there's a lot more ripple on the still waters here than there was earlier this morning, so that'll be replicated out on the water. So confirmation then of the overall standings after just one of 9 races in this 505 World Championships for 2015, with the defending champion in first place. Then we have 2 Australian crews, Higgins and Marsh, Sandy Higgins and Paul Marsh in second place, with Michael Quirk and Luke Payne in third. 2 times world champion, the last time he won it was 2012, Saugman with his crew member Carbo in fourth place, flying the Danish flag. And then the best placed South Africans, which is no surprise, we were expecting that. They're instrumental in organising this World Championships here in Port Elizabeth, so they've been busy, the Funke brothers, and they've been busy out on the water as well. Although they did finish in 5th, they were some way back from the first 4 in the fleet. The British crew that set off as the pathfinders in this race finished in 6th. Ian Pennell, former world champion, Jens Tellen in 7th, and then come one of the 4 German boats, Bowman Roos, in 8th. And a great result, I think, anyway, given their background in the 470 and as newcomers to the 505. The Robinsons, Ricky and Brennan from South Africa, come in 9th, and Howie Hamlin with his new boat set up, and his crew Nelson in 10th place, flying the American flag. And
that's the overview up to place 20. It's out now, so we can look at the data once more of the top 3 boats, Holt and Smith. Let's look at their speed first. That's where they stick out a little bit. 7.55 knots of speed on average in that race for them. And actually Higgins and Marsh and Quirk and Ross sort of agreed on the speed. They were both going 7.45 knots. But when you look at the distance, you can actually see how much more distance Holt and Smith covered. They were going... Actually, it surprises me a little bit, because they were going quite high on the upwind. At least that's the impression I had, and a lot less distance on Higgins and Marsh. That's won them second place over Quirk and Ross, who covered some extra distance. And if we look at the maneuvers, sort of a almost skiff-like behavior on the Aussies there in second place. Higgins and Marsh didn't do many maneuvers, some more moves on Holt and Smith, but in the end he won through speed, especially on that last downwind where he overtook Higgins and Marsh.
To me, I think that tells me that maybe Sandy Higgins and Paul Marsh sailed the best race tactically. I think they lacked a little bit of speed compared with the race winners, Mike Holt and Carl Smith. I think the Aussies sailed a little bit smarter, but they just didn't quite have the raw speed downwind to match Mike Holt. I know we disagree a little bit on what Mike Holt was up to going on up that leg, and I was talking about them maybe being a bit exposed on the right hand side. You weren't so worried. I just think when the 2 boats behind you tack and the boat in front of you is still going the other way, the best thing you can do is tack to cover the 2 boats behind, and to try and put a bit of a split between you and the boat in front. But that's not what he did.
Well, impossible to judge from here what he saw on the right-hand side. He might have seen some opportunity that was more or less obvious that he was going for. He didn't wing it out too far, so he was, I think, still playing it fairly conservatively, and maybe he assumed a little bit more wind on the right-hand side there. That's going to be interesting battles happening throughout the week. I'm really looking forward to them. But in this race now, I think we can safely conclude that it was a bit of the brute force on the downwind, and it will be fun to discuss it with those two guys in the afternoon to find out why that happened. Do they have a secret good spinnaker? Do they have some other technique? And will be something interesting to talk about. But that's what won the race for Holt and Smith.
Okay, so the boats out on the water, just having a little bit of a rest, milling around, waiting for the course to be reset. They'll be taking on a bit of food and a bit of water, and they'll be preparing themselves for race 2 of these World Championships. These tracker images will still remain on the website. You can follow those. We'll take a short break, but we'll be back with race 2 shortly from Port Elizabeth here in South Africa. And in the meantime, remember www.sapsailing.com. From Port Elizabeth in South Africa of the SAP 5O5 World Championships for 2015. We've had race 1 so far. The championships are underway. And guess what? If you've just joined us, it was won by the defending champion Mike Holt and his crew Carl Smith. In second, Sandy Higgins and Paul Marsh of Australia. In fact, it was a 2 and a 3 for Australia because Michael Quirk and Luke Payne took third place. And with 2 minutes to go to the start of race 2, I can tell you Jan Saugman and Jakob Carbo of Denmark came in fourth place in that first race of the championship. So that is how the leaderboard obviously looks. We've had one race of 9 with the conclusion, the big climax, which will be with you live on Friday. So 1 minute 30 to go.
One quick word about the conditions out there. We've got winds blowing at around 10 knots, a little above actually. They're picking up slightly, sometimes gusting up to 12 now. And we've gone to that easterly direction, wind swinging back and forth a little bit between 80 and 90 degrees. Very undisturbed, steady winds, I believe, out there. And now it's just 1 minute and 16 to go for the Pathfinder to head out.
So what we'll
and
do
open that
is
starting line.
We'll watch that start as the Pathfinder sets off. We'll talk our way through that start, and then we'll actually show you what the course will look like for this second race of the World Championships. So 40 seconds to go or so for the Pathfinder to set off, and he will open up the start line, Andy.
Yeah, that's right. And on this occasion, we haven't had it confirmed yet, but I believe it will be Peter and Thomas Funk, potentially the best South Africans, the ones we expect to do best of the home nation. And for finishing 5th in the previous race, they will become the Pathfinder starting on port tack, opening the gate through which the rest of the fleet will follow. And they are held for a minimum of 2 minutes, so they have to sail out to the right-hand side of the course for 2 minutes. Then they are released either to carry on in the direction they're already going or to tack onto starboard, which is what the rest of the fleet will be doing, having already come through the gate.
And there are the Funke brothers that you were talking about. Presumably taking up position now for that start.
Yes, and they have a narrow window of time in which they're allowed to start, and they are just passing the committee boat and
off they
just
go,
setting out. So
race 2 gets underway. It's exactly 2 o'clock here in Port Elizabeth, which I believe is midday GMT, but wherever you're watching on the internet around the world, welcome along. We've got a fine day with fine conditions out on the water off the Eastern Cape.
And Marcus made the observation that in the previous race, most of the eventual top 5 all started early, and in a small fleet, only 33 boats. You probably do, if you fancy your chances, if you fancy your boat speed and you think you're going fast, you're going to want to get out of the gate early, giving yourself options, because the problem with Kiel last year with 170 boats was that if you started early, you were committed to going left. Here with 33 boats, you have more options much earlier on, and tactically you have more choice if you start early, whereas if you start late, you're committed to believing that the right-hand side is the place to be, and we haven't yet seen that the right-hand side is definitively the place to be. It seems like a pretty open racetrack.
First boat to start on the left-hand side were the Danes, Saugman and Carbo, but Conrad and Haynes have done a better start. They must have had a smaller gap next to the rubber dinghy that's driving behind the Pathfinder. Good start for them, heading out to the left-hand side. Looks like the boats on the left are luffing less. It looks like they're sailing deep and fast, as opposed to the boats on the right-hand side. Probably a right-hand shift on that side. Let's see how that evolves.
And where does that leave the South African Pathfinder?
Good. If it's a right-hand shift, he'll be smiling. I mean, if that's the cause of that divergence in courses that do you see that the same way, Andy? It looks like they're going deeper on the left-hand side.
Yeah, it certainly does. It certainly does. So that, yeah, it looks like potentially they've got a higher course on the right hand side, but in terms of the gain line, it looks like it very much paid to get out of the gate early.
But what the wind devices on the water tell us is that there was a 5 degrees shift to the left. Maybe that's what the boats are getting on the left-hand side, but the boats on the right-hand side still have the previous wind. That could be happening, but then we see those boats tacking soon, trying to get back into the middle of the course. At the moment, Saugmann and Conrad's continue to the left. Saugmann seems to get back up to speed. He was a little bit behind, but he's closing in now to that leader line.
It looks like quite a jump at this stage, doesn't it, for the two that started earliest? To see two boats make such a leap out on a gate start, which tends to allow a lot of boats to make a very good even start. Quite surprised to see there's almost a 50-meter gap back to the third place boat.
Well, we'll see how that pans out when they put in a tack. You can never fully trust those advantage lines. They're sometimes off just by a few centimeters or meter, but it could be a little bit more. Depends on the wind calculations. The wind is now swinging to the right, at least down where the wind device is, back at the start.
Looking good for the Americans at the moment in first, third and sixth place in this race. Not many Americans here, only 4 boats here, but very good representation in the top 6 right now.
And so far, very good average speed on Conrad's and Haynes. There's the fastest boat on the course so far, almost 8 knots of speed upwind.
So this race predicted to take about an hour and a half. We're in a position to have a look at the course and see what we can expect to come up over the next 90 minutes or so, as Conrad's and Haynes hold on to that lead.
So we see the windward mark with the offset mark up here in the picture. Boats are going up there first, then to that little offset mark and back down to the gate, back upwind, then the triangle onto the offset mark, the triangle, the wing mark they're heading out to, back down to the gate, up once more, and then the offset mark again down to the gate and into the finish. Same course as before. And we're 1/3 up the first beat, and we can see the advantage line has swung a little bit to the right, putting Holt and Smith in the middle, in the lead again.
Also good gain for Ian Pennell and Johannes Tellen now into second place. And race leaders from race 1 for so much of that race until, the last few hundred meters, it was Sandy Higgins and Paul Marsh who were leading so much of race 1. Well, they're in the top 4 right now, so having another good one.
Plattner and Shelton in the top 3 at the moment, also in the middle of the course. Good average speed so far on them. Pinell and Tellen heading to the left-hand side, getting quite close to that ley line, that left-hand ley line already. Not many boats in the middle of the course, maybe a quarter of the boats, 10 boats heading out to the right-hand side, the rest of the fleet loving that left side. Course is laid well, straight into the wind.
Wind direction is what at the moment?
Around 90 degrees, swinging between 90 and 80 degrees at the moment. 85 right now, winds up to 12, 13 knots.
So not getting stronger as we'd predicted it. I mean, it looks like it's getting strong. It feels like it's getting stronger here on shore. But we were told it could get up to 18 or more knots.
No busters going through so far. Is that what they call it?
That's right.
I believe so.
Yeah, that's right. I was just looking at some info that local sailor racing in this fleet, Warwick Ham, sent me, and he says we're hoping for wind in the range of 15 to 20 knots each day, with a variation between the southwester, which gives flat water but stronger wind, and the northeaster, which is more or less what we have at the moment, which brings nice big waves, which makes the downwind legs really fun. But the southwest wind can turn into a very strong blow, in which case we will have to get off the water quickly to avoid any breakages. The race committee are in contact with several clubs further down the coast and will get prior warning of a buster coming through. And it was the buster that I referred to earlier when the event, the 505 Worlds, was in Durban about 15 years ago, and some of the foreign sailors ignored the local warning of a buster coming through and paid the price with having their boat sink in the Indian Ocean.
And on that note, I think one of the oldest boats in the fleet has retired and come in and is not racing this second race. Andrew Arthur and John Anderson, a local South African boat, have come back in.
Is the boat old or the sailors?
Well, to be fair, having looked at them, I think the boat is old. Built in 1977. The sailors looked in good form.
So 2008 world champion Ian Pennell and Johannes Tellen. Well, Ian Pennell's the 2008 world champion anyway, sailing with Johannes Tellen for the first time in a world championship. A very experienced German crew in the 505, with a very narrow lead over Sandy Higgins and Paul Marsh from Australia, who did so well in the previous race, coming second in that race. Sorry, I'm mixing up my Higginses. It's another Higgins. It's Malcolm Higgins and Nick Johnston. Different Australian boat who are actually in second place. It's it's suddenly seen a big place change, but generally it's a good race for the Higginses. Higgins M in first place and Higgins S in sixth.
And good performance all round for the Aussies. There's only 5 of them, and 3 of them are in the top 10 right now, and they've got a second and a third already in race 1 of these World Championships. So it's working well for the Australians at the moment. But Ian Pennell not far off that lead, and Mike Holt in third place is always dangerous, as we've seen. He moved up the fleet to take race 1 earlier on this morning.
It'll be interesting to find out what work the Aussies have been putting in since the last Worlds, which were only 7 months ago, something like that, because they seem to be putting in a fairly good performance here at the moment. Mike Holt, having won the World Championship August last year, has barely sailed his boat since then, so hasn't had a lot of opportunity for practice. And I think that's been the case for probably a number of the European sailors as well. So maybe the Australians have had more of a chance for practice. It having been the Southern Hemisphere summer, more or less since Kiel last August. It's been a cold winter for Europe and the Northern Hemisphere sailors in California as well. So not that it ever gets too cold there, but I think maybe it's favouring the Australians to have just come out of a Southern Hemisphere summer.
So Higgins and Johnson slightly extending their lead at the front of race 2. We were talking about the number of women in the fleet. Well, Tina Plattner and her crew, David Shelton, are currently sitting in 8th place, representing South Africa. Ahead of the boat that came in 3rd in the last race, Quirk and Payne of Australia. But we keep talking about the Funke brothers being the strongest South African boat, and they've now moved into the top 10. We hadn't seen them for a while in this race, but they've now moved up and are closing in on their fellow South Africans of Plattner and Shelton. But what's happening at the front as we continue leg 1 of 11 in this second race of the World Championships? Well, Higgins and Johnson, Nick Johnson, the Australians, still leading. But Holt and Smith are taking their own line here.
Yes, and just crossing Pennell and Tellen there, bottom of our picture.
And he lets them pass. He's not tacking on top. He continues.
Looks like Pennell is going to sail out to the starboard ley line. Just one final tack, whereas Holt and Smith have at least 2 more tacks to do to get up to the top mark. So how good are the tacks? How much distance do you lose? You want to minimise manoeuvres. Every manoeuvre slows you down. And Marcus has a handle on how many manoeuvres each of these boats is doing, thanks to the SAP analytics.
Yeah, I'll dig that out in a minute. We see some boats on the right-hand side crossing over the ley line. I like the move Holt and Smith are doing, that they close in on the ley line as late as possible, trying to wait for the best and last lift towards that ley line, and the later they go in there, the better chance they have of tacking onto the ley line without losing too much distance. Let's look at how many maneuvers each boat did on this first upwind. Actually, not many at all. Holt has currently 3 tacks under his belt, where Higgins and Johnson have only done 2. Let me get an update on that. Yep, but that's what the analytics say. And only the 6th place boat, Conrads and Haynes, have put in 4 tacks. Clear correlation. The less you move around here, the faster you go, the better off you are. Holt and Smith now on the lead. Higgins and Johnston. They're not brothers, are they? The Higgins brothers?
They could well be. I don't know what they're...
We'll find out over the week.
But there's really very little to choose.
But Holt. Okay, so round they go, round the first mark as they begin the second leg of 11, with the defending champions and winners of race 1 already in the lead of race 2, Higgins and Johnson. Staying close though, 14 metres between them in second place, and then the former world champion from Brittany in Pennell, and Tellen, his crew, in third.
And a more direct downwind line taken by Holt and Smith compared with Higgins and Johnston, who seem to bear away a little bit more slowly. And already the gain line is extending for the American boat in the lead. And we saw how fast they were in the previous race. Are they going to be able to exert that downwind advantage in this race? Very, very early signs it is. But at the moment it looks like they are going fast again.
Speed on the first upwind, by the way, not being the best predictor of windward mark rounding. Holt and Smith went around first. We're only 4th fastest boat, and we even have Foreman and Vanderplug rounding. No, sorry, we have. Let me check that. The 2nd fastest boat. Actually, there is a slight correlation. I take that back. Speed did matter on the first upwind, but Saugmann and Cabo, they were not amongst the fastest ones in that lot. So let's see how this downwind will play out. Holt and Smith in the lead again, and it looks like they're extending already.
So one of our online enthusiasts has confirmed that the Higgins are indeed brothers. They're from Adelaide in South Australia, from a very big sailing family, with all 4 brothers also very good sailors. So
they can do a regatta on their own.
Yeah.
So with Holt and Smith building up a lead of over 100 metres, what are we talking about here? Is it tactics? Is it their physical strength? Is it
it's
just
physics?
It's physics.
It's all about physics. Speed on a reach like this is, in my opinion, it's all about physics and setting up the boat right. There's some dynamics to it, but it's mostly a good setup of your spinnaker and your mainsail and a flawless hull and foils that need to be well taken care of to create the least possible friction and drag. But I'm not sure. Didn't Holden Smith just get a boat here, ordered brand new, delivered here, just days before the event?
I'm not aware of that. I thought this is the same boat that they used at the Worlds last year.
Okay, well, I was told a week ago by someone that their boat might not arrive on time and they will build out a brand new boat. Is
that was Harry Hamlin.
All right, okay.
Yeah. Mike Holt keeps his boat in the UK, his championship boat. He's got two 505s. His best boat is the one that he keeps in Europe, ready to go wherever the next World Championships is. And next year it's in Weymouth, the site of the Olympic Regatta in London 2012. So again, keeping his boat in Essex is just a few hours drive from where the venue will be for next year's SAP 5O5 World Championships. Whereas Harry Hamlin, I mean, he bought a boat in the UK. He is shipping it back to California. He was going to fit it out in California and then ship it back for the Worlds in Weymouth next year. So it's going to do a big triangular route for its first World Championships. But it turns out this boat has been brought into action a lot earlier than expected, as Harry Hamlin fitted it out at breakneck speed, 200 man hours, he and 4 friends, to put this boat together in time for competing at this World Championship.
Big gain for Conrads and Haynes on the right-hand side of the course. Heading out to that side has paid off. They've gained 4 places. So far, so something interesting happening over there. Let's see if they can keep that lead as they're crossing over towards Higgins and Marsh. Their distance shriveling up a little bit.
Conrads and Haynes, they were the first to jibe in the previous race, so they're clearly not afraid to make that early move out to the far side of the course.
Yeah, so far they've gained 4 places on that leg. Decent average speeds. Holden Smith still being the fastest on this leg so far. 12.5 knots, more than half a knot faster than all the rest in the fleet. He definitely has superior downwind speed.
It's starting to look worrying for the rest of the fleet, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm having to join you people making early calls on the outcome of this 505 World Championship. I'm beginning to wonder if anyone's going to be able to stop Mike Holt and Carl Smith if they keep up this kind of downwind pace.
They are looking pretty supreme at the moment, aren't they? They are in control. They were there or thereabouts throughout the whole of the first race before finally taking the lead.
I mean, just look at those numbers clocking on. You can just count up. It's like 201, 202, 200. It's like they're sailing a different class.
And to think he's 46, 47 years old. It took him 25 years of trying to win his first World Championship. And you think 46, 47 would be a little bit late to be leaving it for winning your first world title. You'd think you'd have a few squared away by then. But here he is coming into his prime in his late 40s. He wins one, not easily. That was a battle that he had last year. But having got the first one squared away, he's now sailing with a different crew, with Carl Smith this year, and he's showing every sign at the moment of being able to repeat that performance from Kiel last year.
The first one is always the hardest to win, really, and then it becomes easier once you've found out how to do it, I suppose. And yeah, he looks pretty relaxed, even on the 3D graphics.
Different sports have different perfect ages, let's say. For performance, so we have the World Triathlon Championships going on at the moment here in Port Elizabeth as well, and I know some of the best triathletes out there are in their 40s, and then obviously with football and the majority of sports, or a lot of other sports, youth rules supreme. So in sailing, and more to the point in 505 sailing, is there a perfect age for performance? Because in this fleet we've got a 17-year-old on a British boat, and we've got someone who's in his late 70s on a South African boat. So what's the perfect age?
Well, as long as Marcus referred to physics earlier, as we just see Mike Holt and Carl Smith go round that Leeuwen mark, confirmed in the lead. As long as physics isn't getting in your way, as long as the body isn't deteriorating too much, so that you can still do the job to its full potential, then the rest of it is experience. It's the
and I presume you're talking about helming at this point rather than crewing.
Well, no, I'd say both. I mean, if either the helm or the crew are getting too old and too decrepit to do the job to its full potential, then the boat is going to start going slower. So then you hope that your added experience of sailing all those years is going to outweigh your lack of physical supremacy. And I think people do adapt the way that they sail as they get older. So maybe they conserve energy a little bit more. And the better you get at doing something, the less energy you need to apply to get the job done to some extent. And there's a bit of muscle memory in there. If you've been doing something for a long time, it doesn't require as much physical energy to do it. So overall, I would say you can certainly helm a 505 to its highest potential up until the age of mid-50s or early 60s, provided you've kept yourself in tip-top condition. And that's what someone like Howie Hamlin has done, who's now in his 60s, and he still has the potential to win world championships, but he has kept himself in incredibly good nick as well. He surfs nearly every day when he's at home in California. He doesn't drink too much. He's a clean living guy. There are others in the fleet, I won't mention them right now, but they haven't taken such good care of themselves, and they may not be as high performing as Howie Hamlin in their 60s.
I think it's a good point and really interesting when you look at sailing that actually fitness does matter, but not to the point where illegal drugs would make sense at all. And that also means that someone who's maybe 35 or 40 and who's super fit is still fit enough to play the game at its absolute best. And then experience comes into the picture, where you need to have a lot of experience to be a good sailor. So you can perform for a long time at a very high level. I've been working with Jochen Schumann recently, and he's in his 60s, and he's still a very good sailor. And I think as we see the demographics changing and people all over the world getting older and older, I think it's interesting that we have a sport here where age is not such a limitation. Rather, it can be an advantage if you're fit enough.
Although someone who came to the sport pretty late, I would suggest to any young person out there or kid out there who's watching, get on a boat as quickly as possible, because you need to start early or you just never get it.
Well, it is experience, isn't it? And experience is how many years you've applied to the game. So yeah, get in as early as you can. But whenever you get in, you've got until the rest of your life, until the day you drop dead, to go sailing, because it is a sport for life.
Well, this fleet don't have too long to catch Holt and Smith, who are still out front and almost 100 metres in the lead, although that has been shortened a little bit in the last couple of minutes. So it's America and America, Conrads and Haynes in second place, with the German boat that did pretty well in race one. Bowman Roos bringing up third place at the moment.
Well, Stefan Bowman and Gerard Roos were second, very, very close to winning the world title in 2013 in Barbados. So they've showed good recent form. And again, they're I think they're in their 50s, those guys. So they're not young, but they've been sailing together for a long, long time. I asked Stefan about his preparation for this World Championship, and he said, yeah, we're well prepared, the suitcases are ready, and we're burning for the first warning signal at Port Elizabeth. And he said they're expecting really exciting sailing conditions with big waves, and most of the races in strong breeze. So he's been working hard on his fitness program over the winter.
But also the two of them have such experience together, don't they, as a crew and helm?
22 years they've been sailing together, and 40 years total experience. But each of them have been sailing for 40 years, but 22 of those sailing together. So
which is exactly what you were saying about experience being extremely important,
yeah.
Marcus.
Nice attack from Conrads and Haynes on the left-hand side. Again, big separation between Holt and Smith, and we can't be 100% sure on that advantage liner, but it's certainly not looking bad. And I'll dig out some wind data and see if there's a shift to the left detectable. The tags coming in now, that wasn't a very good tag. They went really deep after that tag, luffing back up. But the distance has gone down between Holt and Smith and Conrads and Haynes. Up, wind shifted again. It's back up.
So this is looking good from Conrads and Haynes. They were doing very well early on in race 1, but then they faded and didn't manage to hang in there. Well, it's looking different for them this time, and it's a 1-2 at the moment for the Santa Cruz Yacht Club in California. Both of these teams sailing out of Santa Cruz, which is a high wind venue in California and the centre of 505 sailing on the west coast of the USA.
Sandy Higgins and Paul Marsh, second in the first race, and now second in race 2 as well, or there and thereabouts. But either way, there's a while to go yet. We're on the 4th leg of 11, and by the way, these this data and these analytics that Marcus is bringing to us from his analytical hub here in the studio, you can access all that on sapsailing.com, and you can have a look around that and explore all the data that is coming off and really focus in on what you're interested in, whether it's, you know, distance sailed or maneuvers, or whether it's wind speed and direction. It's all there for you on sapsailing.com, and you can get in touch with us as well here in the studio if you want. If you're on Twitter, I'm at Alec Wilkinson.
I'm at Sail Juice,
and we'll keep an eye out for your tweets and suggestions, and maybe you could predict who's going to win this World Championship. And if you use hashtag SAP 5O5 Worlds, it'll be even easier for us to follow.
I won't make any more predictions. Nice lead by Holden Smith, by the way.
125 metres now between them and the rest of the fleet. The battle is on, really, for, I would say, second, third, from second to about 8th or 9th place.
Yeah, and we've got Boom and Rose heading out to the left-hand side, and Higgins and Marsh on the right-hand side that Holt and Smith also trusted in a bit more. Difficult to say from here what's going to pan out. So far, when the left-hand side has looked good, that has turned against them down the upwind. But now they're looking good. I'll dig into their speed a little bit more to try and find out how their pace is. Let me look at that. Boom and Rose so far on this upwind, average speed of 7.11, which is actually faster than all the rest except Conrad and Haynes, who have a little bit higher average speed, 7.95. So they're amongst the fastest boats on this leg so far.
James Larger and Richard Hutton Squire flying the South African flag and leading the South African fleet in 8th place at the moment, and doing pretty well considering they're in a new boat.
Nice image right here. Holt and Smith, slight lead. They planted their American flag right up there. Higgins and Marsh on the right-hand side. Boom and Rose now closing in towards the middle of the course area. Nice mix of nations right here. And
be good to see a little bit more of the South Africans in the top 10. But yeah, that's a good spread that we have there right there.
What's interesting is that in Kiel in Germany in the last World Championships, the German boats with their local knowledge definitely had the advantage in the earlier races, and were up there in the top 10 for quite a bit of that, and then conditions changed and everybody got up to speed, and that was that. But here we're not seeing that experience show as far as the South Africans are concerned.
No, and that's a boat speed thing. The local knowledge can only carry you so far. Knowing where to go is one part of the puzzle, but the other part of the puzzle is making sure that you go fast. And I should think it's raw boat speed that the South Africans are lacking.
I'm a little surprised that Holt is letting go of his opponents that much. He's really giving them some leverage on the right-hand side. The wind has swung to the right on this upwind so far, actually quite a bit, 10 to 15 degrees. So I'm not sure if he expects a shift back. That's why he maybe extended so far. So if it's going to come back, he's even going to extend out more. But tactically speaking, he's letting go of his opponents and not staying on their center of gravity, really. But with a comfortable lead like that, I guess it's understandable.
But what a different Holt we're seeing in this World Championship from the last World Championship. In this position in Kiel, he'd been looking to win the championship for 20 years and had never won it. And he would have been out ahead thinking, am I going to get caught? Am I not going to get caught? I've got to keep an eye on the opposition. Now, he's defending world champion. He's confident. He's won the first race. He's out there sailing his race, and he's not worried about anybody else. It's a very different psychological Mike Holt from in the last World Championship.
Yeah, I would think so. As Marcus said, it's winning the first one that's the hard one, and once you know how to win a World Championship, it gets easier after that. And
looks like he broke the jinx. Is that how you call it?
Yeah, because he had finished runner-up a few times, and so he'd shown the potential, but maybe just not quite able to see it through on previous occasions. Well, everyone was there at the World Championship last year, 170 odd boats, legends like Wolfgang Hunger. He got the better of the Germans on their home water, and you mentioned home advantage and local knowledge. Well, it sounded to me, speaking to some of the Germans last year, that local knowledge was actually working against them, because the wind wasn't behaving in the normal way in Kiel, and where they were expecting, I think it was generally to go right. The Australians in particular, Pete Nicholas and Luke Payne, often would go out to the left and find good passage from there.
Nice picture right here where we can see Holt and Smith crossing over the ley line, going high angles. They tacked early a little bit under the ley line, and he's trying to prevent another tack. So he's just pinching it, and that's a skill that top sailors need to have, that they can shift gears and sail high and slow and low and fast and fluently shift between the two if situations require. He did a really good job here. Solid lead for him, and off to the reach where he will certainly not be slower than the rest. And that big gap between them, I wonder who's in that gap, who's not come to this regatta. Certainly a Wolfgang Hunger. Who else do we have who didn't show up?
Well, Mike Martin, I think if he'd have been here from California, I think a former world champion as a helm and a crew, he was looking forward to coming here in strong winds. I mean, he's good in all of it, but he would have been very good if this turns out to be a strong wind regatta.
So in the battle for second and third, we've got the German crew, the Australians, Ian Pennell, plenty of experience there, plenty of experience really in that top five. How do you see that battle for second and third panning out? What have Bowman Roos got to do to stay in front? Because that lead...
You mean in this race?
In this race, yeah.
Yeah, well, the next leg is going to be interesting to see how the speeds will show up at the beginning of the leg, and if boats can change it throughout. We'll compare that to the top speed Holden Smith will probably have again. So this is just a speed lag, in my opinion. There's not much strategy and tactics in it. They're just nailing towards the next mark. Maybe picking the right angles. Often they go higher than the mark, actually. They sail over the mark and put in a jibe. That's a bit of an art, but other than that, they're just hitting the paddle right now. If we zoom out, yep, they're heading straight to that wing mark.
Well, you've got a big contrast in experience together as a team between the second and third place boats. You've got Bowman Roos, who've sailed together for 22 years, and Pennell and Tellen that have barely sailed together for 22 minutes. So great sailors, Penellan's Helen, but you would think that in marginal situations and just here and there'll be a lack of communication, whereas there will be a telepathy and a level of understanding that you can only get through sailing together for such a long time as Bowman Roos have done. So what will we see? How will we see things pan out between those two? I can only think that Bowman Roos would extend their lead just bit by bit on Penellan's Helen, just through having that superior experience as a team.
Well, that's what the data says at the moment. Their average speed, Holt and Smith fastest on that reach leg so far, 12.75 knots average speed so far on. We actually can see that in our leaderboard up here. Bowman Roos doing good speed, but not quite. Oh, that's the current speed we see in that leaderboard. The average speed saying something different. That's Holt and Smith and Bowman Roos actually on par. Bowman Roos maybe with a slight edge. Also interesting, on that last upwind, Bowman Roos were faster than Holt and Smith. 7.2 knots average speed on the upwind, where Holt and Smith only had 6.79, but Bowman Roos covered extra distance. They were probably sailing lower and faster. On that reach right now, if we can get the distance in, we'll see that Holt and Smith should not be extending like they were before, telling from the speed at least, because they're going roughly same average speed, the distance going up and down a little bit. So really good speed on Bowman Roos. But it's not always the speed that you have for a while. You need to have consistency in your speed, and then at sometimes perk out and put in an extra shovel, if you like. And I think that's what Holt and Smith are doing a little better, but they're not extending now.
So
320 meters is quite a lot, though.
It's a considerable amount that looks unlikely that anyone is going to reel in. So
yeah, it's almost a question if we can put in half a kilometer of lead once we get to the finish.
Yeah. Downwind they go, leg 6 of 11, Spinnakers out as they sail the triangle part of the course.
And here you can see that they're actually heading a little higher over that mark to pick the right angle with the best VMG and not just go straight towards that mark. He's definitely doing that on purpose, and then he'll put in the jibe and pick his best angle again without going extra. No, he's sucking in low on a downwind to avoid covering too much distance. Puts his jibe there, and now he'll luff up again.
So he took that mark very tight. Just shaved the mark with very little gap that we can see on the tracking there.
And we are bringing you the 505 Worlds live with our 3D tracker over the next 2 or 3 days. And then on Wednesday we'll begin our live pictures that will further enhance these tracker images as we bring you the climax of the 505 World Championship. So that'll be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And confirmation on the screen of that live TV coverage. We'll have the camera boats out, we'll have aerial shots, we'll have the whole lot for you as we build towards the climax of the World Championship, if Holt and Smith haven't already won it by then.
A bit more data on that last leg. Actually, Ian Pinnell and Talon have had really good speed on that reach as well. A little bit superior to Bowman Roos. That's not what it looked like on the first part of that run. On that reach, where Bowman Roos were doing better. But Pinnell and Talon, they've picked up, so they ended up having 12.74 knots, a third of a knot more than Bowman Roos. So it will be an interesting battle here on that last reach between the two. I'd expect him to catch up a little because it seemed as if he had geared up somewhat. Can we get the distance between second and third placed boat?
Well, it's certainly a tight battle between second, third and fourth, between Germany, Britain and Australia right now, and then a bit of a gap back to the next American boat of Conrads and Haynes.
Conrads and Haynes, who are leading for a short part of this race. but they don't. They just don't seem to have the speed in their boat. 35 metres then between second and third.
And big gaps when you look back to 10th place and you see that it's more than 800 metres or thereabouts for Hamlin and Nelson in 10th. And unfortunately for Hamlin and Nelson, it looks like the American former world champions don't have the legs in their brand new boat. It's just all come together too late. No doubt there'll be a long evening of tinkering in the boat park this evening for Howie Hamlin and Jeff Nelson.
But they are in the top 10, and they're there, and they're challenging for those lower places, and maybe tinkering all night in the shed will work. Can they turn that around? I'm not saying that they can take on Holt and Smith, but they could be up there for a podium place at some point.
Oh yeah, podium is certainly not out of the question, but I think they have higher aspirations than that. I think they still come to these world championships believing that they can win another world championship, and it looks to me it is only day one of the competition, but we are seeing patterns starting to emerge. And if Holt and Smith square away the first day with 2 race wins, it's an ominous sign for the rest of the week.
Well, it won't just be Hamlin and Nelson tinkering with their boats. There'll be quite a few crews working in the boat park, trying to get their settings right and improve their performances. Above all, the crews that have got borrowed boats. There are some South African crews and certainly a few American crews who've had problems with getting their own boats to Port Elizabeth, and they've been given the loan of some local 505 boats, and they will be checking the settings and altering things to suit them better after today's performance.
Boom and Rose haven't lost on that last reach, according to my data, and it looks like they got pushed a little bit before that rounding mark, and then they decided to push it and to go fast, and they haven't lost anything, and we're in for interesting last upwind. It is the last upwind, is it?
Yes, it will be.
Yes, it is. Yep. And an interesting battle will be going on between Boom and Rose and Pinell and Talon, and the 4th boat is not far off, and the 5th one is not either. So the battle is on between these 4 boats. So far, they're all heading out to the right-hand side, the side that paid favorable on the first downwind. Holt sort of going towards the middle of the course. I'd expect him to tack now to play it safe. But he's not very strict on the geometrics, I'd say. He lets him go a little bit. Again, would be easy to put in that so-called curry tack. I think that's what you call it in England, isn't it?
Covering tack?
No, the curry tack.
Curry tack.
Well, that's what we call it in Germany. We thought you came
It's
up
a hot
with that.
maneuver.
No, actually, you tack right after the leeward gate or the leeward mark, and then as soon as the next boat comes around it, you tack again, and you sort of put a loose cover on them. That's what we call a curry tack.
But it's all very well us talking about the distance between first and second and third, and we can see it to the metre thanks to all the tracking devices on these boats. But out there, they're just looking across the water. They're using their eyes and their experience to try and judge distance between them. And right now, the distance between Bohm and Roos and the leaders seems to be more or less steady, but it's never decreasing.
No, it's rather extending. Holt is going a lot higher than Boom and Rose. Boom and Rose more speed. They have average speed so far on this leg of 7.37 knots. It's a lot faster than Holt and Smith, but Holt and Smith are going much higher. A lot of extra distance covered there by Boom and Rose.
Do you have much sense of how much the breeze is shifting?
Yeah, actually, it's gone to the left since that windward mark rounding. Well, wait a minute. No, since they rounded that wing mark, the wind's shifted roughly 10 degrees to the left. So wouldn't be surprised if it swings back to the right a bit, where it has been during the whole race. So that would be good news for Böhmen Roos. I don't think that advantage line is correct at the moment. It should be shifted to the right a little bit. We can see how boats are sailing out beneath the ley line. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see the boats on the right hand side coming out good. But you can, on this image, you can see the difference in angle between Böhmen Roos and Holden Smith, which are going much higher than the rest of the fleet. Well, not much, but maybe 5 degrees. And now they're playing it really safe. All their opponents are sort of downwind of them. Maybe they are a little bit further to the left, but not in a dangerous situation. They're covering Pinel and Tellin and Böhmen Roos. Nothing major can happen there, especially not in these conditions with those fairly steady winds out there. Wind speeds around 12 knots, going up and down a little bit, but fairly steady breeze.
So I just wondered if Holt and Smith are not doing tight covers that much, because I'm just wondering if the breeze is steady enough that they're not worried about it. If the wind direction is steady, then you don't need to worry so much about covering the opposition, because you haven't got that random factor to worry you. So you can just sail in whatever direction you think the boat is going to travel the fastest, and often that's by doing the fewest maneuvers.
I think that's what's happening. But I'm quite sure now that they headed out if we zoom out, maybe we can look at how far we are on the right hand side of the course. I'd assume we're getting closer to the ley line. I think he's going to put on a closer cover here, probably pretty much to windward of that boat that is crossing him now. I can't see him going a lot further. He's someone that doesn't like the ley line very much so far in these races, and I saw that in Kiel as well. He goes onto the ley line quite late. He lets him go a little bit now. I'd assume he would tack in the next 10 seconds. I'd almost put my money on that. But maybe you see something out there on the right hand side. Let's see what he does. It's not textbook like, is it?
Not your textbook, Marcus. But what do you think is the reason for him coming into the ley lines as late as he does?
There he goes. Well, going onto the ley line always lets you run out of options. If you go onto it early, you can never benefit from a lift anymore. It's game over. And also the earlier you try to go onto it, the harder it is to judge the ley line. So going onto it late allows you to put a very accurate tack onto the ley line and save you from covering extra distance. And so far he's done that in every race. Wouldn't be surprised if he continues on this tack now all the way to the left hand side ley line, because there's really no reason for him to tack anymore. He just needs to loosely cover Böhmen Roos and Pinel and Tellin, and that's it.
And he looks like he has a pretty nice angle there, having just gone onto that tack later than you wanted him to. Maybe he was holding on for a bit of a shift.
He's going a little slower than the rest, but that's saying nothing about the VMG, about the real advantage cover towards the wind, and I think he's probably got the best VMG on the course. I can try and look in that data in a minute. But his speed is below 7 knots, where Böhmen Roos are actually doing 7.5 knots. So they're footing off. They're going a lot quicker.
South African pairing of Larger and Hutton and Squire still in it, in 10th place. They've led the South African fleet for much of this race. Can they hold on to a top 10 finish though, with 3 legs still to go?
Yeah, so VMG wise, oh, that's actually not average VMG. I would have to dig that out. That's too early to call, but Holt and Smith certainly look good on the VMG calculation. Always up there, 5.2 knots, 3 knots. Bill Monroe's not far off that, though.
How are the double world champions from Denmark, Jan Saugman and Jakob Carbo? How are they doing? Because they were doing well in the first race.
They're in currently 12th place. And I can look where they put in their losses. Let me look back. Give me a minute to get that data.
Because they're the only ones missing from the top 10 that were in the top 4 of the last race. Michael Quirk and Luke Payne in there in 7th. They were 3rd placed, and the 2nd place Sandy Higgins and Paul Marsh also in the running for Australia. And of course, for the rest of the fleet, it's all it's all very well. Holt and Smith get this; they stay top of the leaderboard, but they could slip up in any of the remaining 7 races if they don't slip up here, of course, and that would be it. That would bring whoever's in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or even 5th and 6th place, straight back into it.
It looks like it's going to be
at this stage of the week. Everyone is going to want to be holding on to a podium place or certainly a top 10 place. They're all still very much chasing those top places in the leaderboard.
Yeah, and there's plenty that can go wrong
And
for
look,
Holt and Smith.
Funke Brothers back in it in 11th place now. We haven't seen them for a while in this race, but they're clawing their way back in. And confirmation of what Marcus was saying, that Saugman is sitting in 12th.
The toughest way to defend the world title for Holt and Smith is if the wind dropped really light this week, and then it becomes a much more open game, more luck involved, less of a power game, more of a chess game, and there'd be many more competitors able to put in a good performance in those kind of conditions. But if the breeze holds up, if the wind is strong, as it's mostly expected to be in Port Elizabeth, it's going to be very hard to beat Holt and Smith because their boat handling is excellent, their speed through the water is great, they're tactically very strong, they don't really have any weaknesses in the strong winds.
Not much movement in the fleet rank-wise, up and down. They're staying quite steady. Shows that the conditions are really steady. Once they've gone around the Windward Mark, not that much happening really in the fleet. Actually, the overtaking maneuver we saw by Holt and Smith was probably one of the fewer ones we've seen today. We can look back at the data later on, but that was spectacular because they had a real edge, and that real edge could be the deciding factor for this event. Their lead has gone down a little bit. Looks like he's almost relaxing, looking forward to his favorite leg, the downwind. I suppose it's his favorite leg. Will be nice to talk to him about it later on. With beautiful 12 knots out there now, I don't see him getting into any sorts of trouble, boat handling wise, carrying that win home. And a double bullet on the first day. It's not very often that you see that happening at a World Championship.
No.
And not by such a large margin.
And that will come as some relief to Mike Holt and Carl Smith because they're checking in again after not having raced against the rest of the world for 7 months. You don't really know how things have moved on. Who's been working hard while you've been at home doing whatever you're doing. And as we mentioned earlier, Mike Holt hasn't managed to get a lot of sailing in between winning the Worlds in Kiel last year and turning up here in Port Elizabeth. I saw him racing at a one-off single-day event in the middle of the British winter, just near London Heathrow Airport, at Queen Mary Reservoir. It's called the Bloody Mary, and has about 250, 300 boats competing, lots of different types of boat. And there was Mike Holt, just happened to be over from California, just visiting friends, doing a bit of business in Europe, and turned up and did a single day's competition in his 505 in the pretty bizarre but very exciting event called the Bloody Mary, and it's a dinghy sailors classic in the UK.
It always.
How did he go?
Not particularly well, actually. The thing is that the 505 has a very big spinnaker. It's very good at going close to downwind. It's like asymmetric boats like the 49er, very good at going dead downwind, not very good at cross-reaching across the breeze, and it's a very strange course. You're sort of sailing around the edge of the reservoir, so it tends to favour boats like single-handed boats like lasers and contenders and boats like that that only have one sail to work with anyway. Doesn't tend to favour big spinnakers, so no, not terribly well.
It always amuses me how bad a reservoir can taste when you've gone swimming in it.
It's not a good sign, is it?
Look, there are the top 12. The Funke brothers of South Africa, 2 South African boats in there, but I can tell you just outside the top 12 we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 South African boats coming up, including Tina Plattner and her crew David Shelton in 13th. The Robinsons in 14th and the Hams in 15th. It's a family affair here off Port Elizabeth, as Holt and Smith continue to keep control and increase the control they have on this race.
And it's a good gap now for second place Bowman Roos from Germany as well. They were in that tight battle with Pinel and Tellen, the British-German team, in third place. But it's a 100-metre gap for the second place boat as well now. And yeah, as Marcus was saying a few minutes ago, stable conditions can result in a very stable leaderboard with very few place changes. Just seen a quick change of leaderboard there between 2 Australians, so you've got 3 Australian teams in 5th, 6th and 7th, and a battle between the Higgins brothers. Looks like it's Malcolm Higgins and Nick Johnston on a bit of a charge, just climbing up to 4th place, but still probably too far back to be able to threaten for a podium place in this race.
Yeah, it's a glorious breezy day here off the Eastern Cape, and the race village with the fans, the home fans, hoping and willing on the South Africans up the fleet, watching it on a big screen and enjoying a few beers, I should think, and the sunshine here in Port Elizabeth as well.
We had some pretty awful weather not far from here yesterday, and I only arrived in Port Elizabeth last night. I don't know what it was like yesterday, but I think it was pretty horrible weather. So here we are, not a cloud in the sky today.
Rain overnight, and cloudy it was. So it's cleared. It's done us proud for this first day of the World Championships. Pretty industrial harbour, still very much a working port is the port of this city.
And it's taken a lot of cooperation from other people in the Port Authority, the Navy. There's been a lot of cooperation to make this event happen and bring it all together. And a lot of local enthusiasm for having a World Championship here in Port Elizabeth.
And they've certainly done.
Quarter-kilometre lead for Holt Smith. Nothing's going to happen there, but Jürgen Rose have a nice battle. Yeah, big lead still, quarter of a kilometre. They're ahead, and Bim and Rose and Pinel and Tellen are having a bit of a battle, but looks like Bim and Rose can hold them off. And where's my second favourite, Higgins and Johnston? No, Higgins and Marsh. They've climbed back to 4th place. So they're likely to get a second and a fourth place. Really good result, really, on the first day of the Worlds. If there weren't Holt and Smith putting in 2 bullets to start with, he'll be quite happy coming back ashore. And I think we're going to interview him up on stage later on in the SAP marquee and see what he thinks about today. And maybe we get, what do you say, Higgins and Marsh up on stage as well?
Whoever you want, Marcus.
You want the race officer?
I'd like to speak to the race officer just to see how things are likely to pan out for the week. But I think there are so many stories and so many interesting characters within this fleet that whoever we get to speak to will be fascinating and entertaining, and we'll certainly have stories to tell about today's 2 races. Although quite how much of the race Holt and Smith have observed from their position so far ahead, I don't know. But maybe they'll be able to tell us exactly how they've done it and why they're going so well right now. And of course, we will be bringing you some of those interviews tomorrow in our coverage of day 2. We're approaching the final turn though, and then it's the final short leg to the finish line. And
it looks so easy for Holt and Smith.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Well, at this rate, they'll already be back at the bar before Bowman Roos finish, I think.
Final jibe, final major manoeuvre for Holt and Smith, so the rest should be a formality. Short burst to the finish. But Holt wasn't feeling well yesterday. He'll be really pleased to have squared away 2 race wins. He was sick in bed for most of yesterday. He's not sure exactly what it was, but he came down to do a bit of work on the boat, and he said it took him about 2 hours to tie 2 knots on some pieces of string, and he decided enough was enough, took himself back to bed, slept for 12 hours solid.
And the medicine worked, because he's just crossed the line in first place for the second time in these World Championships with Carl Smith, his crew, and they'll be celebrating on board. Job done, thank you very much. And well, maybe if he's still feeling under the weather, it'll be straight back to bed then rather than to the bar. But look at the gap and the time it's going to take for Bowman Roos to close that gap and cross the line for second place. And, you know, look at the gap between them and third place. Bowman Roos, the German boat, have done extremely well. They just haven't been in that same class as Holt and Smith this afternoon. So Britain's Ian Pennell makes his last turn as the Germans cross the line in second place.
Well, that's a good result if Pennell and Tellen cross in third, as it looks like they will. A team that's only just got together for this regatta, and yes, both great sailors, one of them a world champion, but getting that synergy, getting your crew work together isn't easy, and so to get a third place in the World Championship on day 1 is very good. They did show good form in the pre-Worlds. They actually tied for the lead with the eventual winners, Holt and Smith. They both finished on 6 points, but because Holt won the last race of the pre-Worlds, he became the winner of the pre-Worlds. And some people think that's unlucky. I did ask Mike Holt if he felt concerned that he'd won the pre-Worlds and therefore jinxed himself at winning the Worlds. And he said, well, he didn't realise that when they finished the second race, that was going to be the final race of the pre-Worlds. They were expecting another one. It didn't happen. So suddenly he found himself to be the winner, but he's not concerned. He said there's plenty of people that have won the pre-Worlds that have gone on to win the Worlds. So he's not one of those superstitious sailors. He just believes in hard work and application, and that's what we've seen today.
Tell you what, though, we've got an interesting battle for fourth place between the Australians and the one-time race leaders, Conrads and Haynes. But it looks like those positions are going to be held with the Australians coming in ahead of the Americans.
And that's a very good gain for Michael Quirk and Luke Payne. They made those gains pretty late on.
And a painful loss for Higgins and Marsh, who were in fourth position already.
So the vital points that Quirk and Payne have just pulled back there, and my mental maths isn't quite good enough to say where they'll be overall, but I'm wondering if they'll certainly be top 3 and maybe even second overall after that. So
yeah, I think they may well be, actually, because they'll be on 7 points. So we'll let the computers crunch away, and they'll start crunching as soon as the last boat crosses the finish line, and then we'll be able to bring you the overall leaderboard. But there's no doubt who will be sitting top of that leaderboard, and that will be the defending champions from America.
And this is what he came here for. A long way to come, but very committed to his sailing. Very successful businessman, as well as many people in the 505 fleet are, but they take their 505 racing incredibly seriously. They prepare meticulously for events like this. And, well, that illness, there's not much you can do about that if you suddenly get hit by a last-minute illness, but it doesn't seem to have done Holt any harm at all.
In comes Saugman and Carbo in 11th place. They finished 4th in the first race, so they're going to be very disappointed, I think, with that result, and that's a result that could cost them an overall podium finish at the end of the week.
Well, you do get to discard your worst race, so they will be hoping that will be their discard, but there's many people who will hope that one of their results from their first day will be a discard, and you never know. It could be that you end up counting both your races from the first day, depending on how things pan out for you the rest of the week. But really, a lot of these sailors will still be thinking, well, we didn't have such a great race in one of the heats today, but at least we got one good one, and we're still in the hunt. But much better if you don't use up your discards early on in the regatta.
And as Ricky and Brennan Robinson of South Africa come up to that final turn, Tina Plattner finishes somewhere around the middle of the fleet. We're now seeing concluding the race, and for a lot of these sailors it'll be back to shore, and then a little bit of a rest and a drink and some food, and then to work on the boat to make sure it's all shipshape for tomorrow.
That was actually a 13th place for Tina Plattner, quite respectable. She's not been in the class for very long, and I think that's very decent. I would expect that she's quite happy with a top 10 finishing position, and she's still in it, I reckon.
Just one race on the schedule tomorrow.
12 o'clock start.
Yes, it is. 12 o'clock local time.
Andy looking a little bit worried in case he was going to have to get up early. But no, it's a
So
midday
the
start.
overall schedule is how many races?
A total
the
of
week?
9 races,
9
for
races.
the
9
World
races.
Championships. And you can only sail 2 races maximum per day.
And there's 1 race tomorrow, and then 1 for Monday.
Then 2 for Monday. And then Tuesday, it's a day off, when people can get an opportunity to go sightseeing and take in.
Seeing some South African game parks.
Exactly.
Or, of course, being professionals, they'll go out on the water and put together and work on things that have gone wrong in the past days. I don't think that's going to happen, is it?
Well, you don't know. I mean, I remember at Kiel last year, there weren't many that went out on the day off in the middle of the regatta, but amongst those that did was Mike Holt. So he was one of the few that took advantage of the day off. For him, it wasn't a day off; it was another training day. So there may well be those that go out and think they need to work on their game.
And joking apart, yes, it's a mixed fleet with mixed experience, and there are youngsters and older sailors as well. But all of them take this really very, very seriously. They're very professional in their outlook, and these are, after all, the World Championships, and they all want to win it, no matter how little chance they have of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to want to win, of course, another thing to believe that you're in a position to do so. But everyone wants to do the best they can, and they work as hard as they can to get to that position. The 505 it's not a cheap boat. You know, you invest a lot of time and money in getting it up to racing spec, and so having invested all that time and money, you want to make the best of your opportunities.
And a lot of effort has gone into rigging the boats and preparing them and getting them ready. So we're in a position now to confirm then the final results and therefore the leaderboard after 2 races. As you predicted with your quick round of maths, Quirk and Payne in second place for Australia. But 5 points behind the leaders already with just 2 races gone. The other Australians, Higgins and Marsh, in third place. So Boom and Roos, who had a good second race, in fact finished second, of course, with 10 points in fourth place. Then come the Brits, the former Danish world champion, Saugman, in seventh, and the Funke brothers, as predicted, lead the South African march. And they are on 17 points. So that's the top 10.
Let's look at some analytics. Let's see what the data says about that last race. Let's focus on the top 5 boats, how they performed, and let's look at their average speeds first, how they compare. Quite a good correlation with the top 3, but then you're kind of surprised that Saugman and Cabo had higher speeds than the third place boat, and really fast also. The Funke brothers in 5th place. So let's look at the distance to, is that the first race or the second race?
That's the first race you were.
Sorry, then let's switch to the second race and again look at the top 5 and speed first. Okay, there's someone who really clear correlation between the top 4, and then someone really sticks out, Conrads and Haynes, with a lot of speed in 5th place. But then let's look at the distance.
Wow.
Yeah, here you can see why they didn't do that well with all that distance. They must have gone really low and fast. Would be interesting to ask them why they do that. It's quite extreme. You can see a totally different style in sailing. You can see that Holt and Smith actually covered very little distance, and I think the key for them is to go high but still have decent speed, and they effectively cover less distance. And since this is average speed, you'll also get the downwind speeds averaged in there, and they still have a high average because they have such excellent downwind speed. So it's going high and still decent speed, maybe even fast, and on the downwind faster than anyone, I'd say. That seems to be the winning combination. Let's look at the moves they make, the maneuvers. Maybe a bit too much moving around on the 4th place boat, 27 moves compared to 21 and 15 for the first 3 boats, and Conrads and Haynes with 25. Interesting data to get a clue on what has happened out there on the water, and maybe we can also review the start with these top 5 boats, whether they have started early or late. We're just compiling that analysis. That takes a little while. Here we go, and let's play that. We can see, and I do remember Holt and Smith starting quite early. No, that we just have the top 4 in here at the moment, and we can see Holt and Smith starting really early here. It's a little bit difficult to read because the wind ladder is off place here. So here Holt and Smith go and start and accelerate. We'll fix that graphic to make it a little bit more understandable. But I saw that Holt and Smith went on the racetrack really early, and could play his own game and not start too late. I wouldn't call that a clear pattern yet, that you have to start early, but maybe also an interesting point to talk to Mike Holt about tonight, about his start tactics, whether he wants to go out early or not.
Fascinating details and data coming off the water from those trackers, and you can access it yourselves at sapsailing.com. And I think the final boats in the fleet have now finished race 2 of the World Championships. So we've got one race tomorrow, which gets underway at midday. We'll bring you that live via our 3D tracker and all the SAP data analytics as well. And we hope you'll join us for that. But for the moment, from Marcus Bauer and Andy Rice and myself, Alec Wilkinson, thanks for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.